Chapter 2473. Immediately, Jianqin Supreme will permeated the surroundings. It enveloped the region in a supreme, domineering manner. At that moment, he seemed to have become the ruler of the world. Wherever his will was, everything in the surroundings would be under his control. At the same time, all the primordial realm experts on the spatial battleship felt like the world had changed drastically at that moment. It seemed to become rather unfamiliar. As for the weaker godhood cultivators, they sensed in surprise that their usage of laws seemed to be obstructed by a mysterious and great power, preventing them from using their laws as they wished. It was as if all the laws they comprehended in the world had completely vanished. Not only that, but even the origin energy was no longer under their control. They were unable to absorb any energy from outer space. Jianqin Supreme was useless against primordial realm experts, but godhood cultivators were unable to resist it at all. Bang! 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 With a string of violent explosions, all the godhood golden sword beasts within a range of 100,000 kilometers around Jianqin exploded at that moment. The several tens of thousands of golden sword beasts in the region were all killed in a single instance. Not a single one survived. Their golden blood and broken limbs drifted through outer space. Immediately, the golden sword beasts that had surrounded the spatial battleship, so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through them. What is this? It's so heaven-defying. All the primordial realm experts gasped when they saw this. They were extremely shocked. Even though this was the second time they had seen this, they were still unable to hide their shock. As for the divine king on the deck behind them, they were all stunned. They were utterly shocked. Full speed. Charge out. Giant Pain called out from the deck. His voice directly reached the ears of the cultivators in charge of controlling the spatial battleship. Immediately, the spatial battleship shuddered violently. All the formations were activated at full speed. Without the obstruction of the golden sword beasts, the spatial battleship immediately became unobstructed. It shot out as a streak of light, breaking out of the encirclement very quickly and vanishing into the sea of stars. At that moment, the chaotic space immediately fell silent. Having lost their target, the golden sword beasts that were only at godhood began to wander aimlessly, waiting for their leader's orders. Boom! Before long, a rumble suddenly rang out. The formation cast down by Giant Pain's 9 swords shattered, and the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, golden sword beast broke free. Its huge, golden body trembled in outer space as it emitted furious mental pulses. Sensing their leader's anger, all the golden sword beasts in outer space stopped moving. Their sword-shaped bodies trembled gently as if they were shivering. At this moment, a figure shot over with lightning speed. He moved extremely quickly, as if he had teleported. Even 9th heavenly layer infinite primes would not be able to detect him as he hurried over. Very soon, the figure stopped among the golden sword beasts. He did not try to hide himself at all, simply hovering where the spatial battleship had stopped. He completely ignored all the golden sword beasts that had gathered around him. The figure was the elder of mountains and seas who had chased over from the desolate plain. The elder of mountains and seas hovered in outer space with his eyes closed as if he was sensing something silently. A while later, he slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the corpses of the golden sword beasts floating in the surroundings, and his eyes lit up. He said excitedly, "Jianqin has stayed here for a while. I'm certain that he took part in the battle earlier. Hee, the old man is getting closer and closer to Jianqin." However, Jianqin seems to have boarded a spatial battleship. The spatial battleship is fast, but how can it be faster than the old man? The speed of a spatial battleship was only equivalent to a chaotic prime in outer space. The elder of mountains and seas was a grand prime, so his speed was incomparable to chaotic primes. At this moment, a golden streak of light suddenly stabbed towards the elder of mountains and seas. The furious 9th heavenly layer infinite prime golden sword beast discovered the Elder of Mountains and Seas. Without any hesitation, it immediately charged towards the Elder of Mountains and Seas. However, the Elder of Mountains and Seas did not even glance at it. He raised his hand leisurely, and with a squeeze of 2 fingers, the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime golden sword beast was caught between his fingers effortlessly. Afterwards, the Elder of Mountains and Seas exerted some force with his 2 fingers, and with a crack, the golden sword beast that was so powerful that it had forced the spatial battleship to use its trump card, the Light of Destruction, immediately collapsed. Its colossal body turned into countless fragments that scattered in the surroundings. Its consciousness vanished as well. In the blink of an eye, the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime golden sword beast was wiped out. It had been killed by the Elder of Mountains and Seas with just a raise of his hand. A mere 9th heavenly layer infinite prime dares to attack old man? Space beasts really are space beasts after all. They're all creatures with low intelligence, the Elder of Mountains and Seas sneered disdainfully. At this moment, another dazzling streak of golden light shot over from the depths of outer space. It radiated with a blanketing presence as it made its way towards the battlefield. It was another golden sword beast, but it was much smaller than the primordial realm golden sword beasts. It was only a few 100 meters long. However, the presence it gave off and the pulses of energy it possessed completely exceeded the 9th heavenly layer infinite primes. A chaotic prime emperor among the golden sword beasts, the Elder of Mountains and Seas murmured as he stared at the golden light. He still did not take it seriously. At this moment, the chaotic prime golden sword beast that had hurried over seemed to know that its 9th heavenly layer infinite prime had been slain. It charged towards the Elder of Mountains and Seas aggressively with shocking, killing intent. "Humph, you're asking for death." The Elder of Mountains and Seas sneered when he saw this. With a wave of his hand, the surroundings immediately darkened. The power of laws immediately surged out like an ocean, blasting the chaotic prime golden sword beast far away. "Don't disturb the old man, or the old man will kill you as well," the Elder of Mountains and Seas said coldly. Afterwards, he closed his eyes and used his innate ability to sense Jianshin's location again. He could only sense Jianshin's location with his innate ability, but he could not pinpoint his exact location. As a result, he would stop every once in a while to sense Jianshin's location, just in case he deviated. The chaotic prime golden sword beast seemed to understand the Elder of Mountains and Seas' strength after suffering once. It did not continue to charge up recklessly. Instead, it sent out a sharp mental pulse, piercing through space and reaching the depths of outer space. The Elder of Mountains and Seas was surprised. He immediately opened his eyes, and he became rather stern. He said sternly, "It's actually still asking for help. Don't tell me the strongest golden sword beast horde isn't a chaotic prime emperor, but a sovereign equivalent to a grand prime?" As if to prove the Elder of Mountains and Seas' words, the space before him suddenly ripped open as soon as he finished speaking. Immediately, dazzling light shone out. A golden sword that was only 10 meters long shot out from the crack with blinding light. It shot towards the Elder of Mountains and Seas with absolute killing intent. A sovereign among golden sword beasts. The Elder of Mountains and Seas' expression changed, and he produced a deep cry of surprise. He finally became stern. "P.S. Xiaoyao will find time to make up for the 8 chapters he owes, so please don't worry. In addition, in the past few days, many brothers on the public account have asked how long a certain website has not been updated. Xiaoyao will explain here. Currently, Xiaoyao is only responsible for the updates of the main website. As for the updates of the other websites, in fact, they are all synchronized with the main website. Other than the main website, Xiaoyao can't interfere with the updates of the other websites. In order for everyone to see when the book is updated and how it is updated as soon as possible, please take a few minutes to follow Xiaoyao's public account, just in case the lack of updates on the other websites affects your reading. Search result: Xingxingxiao 110. Pinyin was the pseudonym of Xiaoyao, Xinxing. There was also a number for the police, or you could directly search for Xinxing Xiaoyao on the public account. Chapter 2474. Sovereign-level golden sword beasts were equivalent to peak grand primes. They were the most powerful existences that stood at the very apex of outer space. The elder of mountains and seas had never thought that a sovereign-level existence would emerge from the small group of golden sword beasts he came across in outer space. Afterwards, deafening booms rang out. The elder of mountains and seas and the golden sword beasts engaged in an intense battle in outer space, causing space to collapse and the sea of stars to tremble. In the distance, Jianqin's spatial battleship moved as quickly as it could. Like a ghost, it shot through outer space silently. Many cultivators cleaned up the blood on the deck of the spatial battleship. They were either silent or sorrowful as they collected the corpses on the deck. Many cultivators had died in the battle against the golden sword beasts this time. There were many divine king experts among them. If it were not for the fact that Yi Jianping had returned in time with the primordial realm experts, there would probably be even more cultivators who died on the spatial battleship. However, these cultivators did not have any special identities or origins. The cultivators with true backgrounds remained in their cabins the entire time and did not take part in the battle. Anya Joyo of the Darkness clan was one of them. Spectral Elder, you're actually injured. At this moment, Anya Joyo stared at the Spectral Elder in front of him in shock within the luxurious cabin of the Darkness clan. He cried out. The light in his eyes flickered a few times before he continued to ask, "Is the person who auctioned the god artifact dead?" As soon as Anya Joyo mentioned Jianqin, the Spectral Elder could not help but think of his battle against Jianqin. He had basically been unable to put up any resistance at all. This immediately angered him, and his impression of Anya Joyo became extremely terrible. We can't afford to provoke that person. Joyo, it's best if you don't provoke him. You need to understand that although our Darkness clan is a peak clan that everyone fears on the Jade Fluid Plane, we're still nothing in the entire Saints world. There are far too many existences that can destroy our Darkness clan. I don't want you to make an enemy out of our Darkness clan because of your arrogance, the Spectral Elder said coldly. The Spectral Elder said coldly. After the battle in outer space, his fear for Jianqin had reached the depths of his bones. With his strength, even if he could not defeat Yi Jianping, a ninth heavenly layer infinite prime, he was confident that he could escape with ease. This was because even experts at Yi Jianping's level would struggle to discover them due to their concealment techniques. However, he truly felt like he had nowhere to hide when he faced Jianqin. He did not know what method Jianqin had used. He could actually see through his concealment techniques. His laws of darkness, the ancient secret technique of his Darkness clan, seemed to be completely useless before Jianqin. Moreover, Jianqin's method of killing countless divine king golden sword beasts with a single thought shocked the Spectral Elder. Afterwards, he began to doubt Jianqin's identity. It was impossible for someone with such astonishing battle prowess and such terrifying techniques to be simple. The Spectral Elder struggled to imagine just how terrifying the organization behind Jianqin was. Anya Joyo frowned and asked sternly, "Is that person really that powerful? Even you aren't his opponent?" The Spectral Elder sighed gently. A sliver of lingering fear appeared in his ordinary eyes. He said, "You might not believe me, but if it weren't for the fact that he showed mercy and didn't want to kill me, I probably wouldn't have survived until now. The person who sold the god artifact is a sixth heavenly layer infinite prime at the very least. Even stronger. What?" Anya Joyo's face changed drastically. At the same time, the primordial realm experts of the Float Empire all gathered on the top floor of the spatial battleship under Yi Jianping's lead. This time they did not sit in the air. Instead, they set up a white jade table and invited Jianqin over. They entertained Jianqin with aged wine. The strength Jianqin had displayed in the battle against the golden sword beasts had already won their respect. His contributions had earned their admiration as well. A few days ago, Fa Yin, who had tested Jianqin for a god artifact, raised his cup and apologized to Jianqin for his rash actions. Jianqin waved his hand. He did not mind. Back then, Fa Yin had only probed a little and didn't do anything excessive. Therefore, he didn't take it to heart. The way of the sword that fellow Yang Yuqian has comprehended is so powerful that it's rarely seen. Your master must be a renowned expert in the saint's world, right? Yi Jianping asked as well. His old eyes shone with interest, filled with sword intent. Chang Yang's name had already become familiar on the desolate plain. As a result, Jianqin used the name Yang Yuqian again after leaving the desolate plain. Jianqin understood that Yi Jianping was investigating his background. He immediately smiled mysteriously and said, "My master is indeed a renowned expert. There's barely anyone in the world who doesn't know his name. However, he has specially warned me that unless I possess the strength of a Grand Prime, I can't admit that I'm his disciple before others, nor can I mention my origins." Jianqin said half-truthfully, the master he mentioned was naturally one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals' world, the old master of the twin swords. He had made up the rest. Before, he possessed the strength to fend off Grand Primes. He could not reveal his true identity. However, when his words landed in the ears of the Sword Equality Empire's people, they immediately became horrified. All of them became quite frightened. Grand Primes were figures on the level of ancestors in their float empire. They were terrifying figures who could make the entire jade fluid plane tremble with just a stomp of their feet. However, such a supreme realm could only become the threshold for this fellow Taoist named Yang Yuqian to speak of his master's name to the outside world. This left Yi Jianping and the others extremely shocked. They struggled to imagine just how terrifying and extremely prideful Jianqin's master was. With that short sentence, Jianqin completely shut down Yi Jianping's thoughts of investigating his origins. "Oh, right, it's said that an extremely grand event is about to be held on the Star Brilliance Plane. Many peak clans on the Jade Fluid Plane have hurried over, and they seem to have brought great gifts. May I ask what's happening on the Star Brilliance Plane?" Jianqin used this opportunity to ask. He was about to arrive on the Star Brilliance Plane, so he needed to understand it beforehand. "How can you not know about something so important, fellow Yang Yuqian?" Fa Yun looked at Jianqin in surprise. Afterwards, he explained patiently. The supreme figure of the Star Brilliance Plane, the 9 Brilliant Star Lord, suddenly took in a foster son 1,000 years ago. As the 9 Brilliant Star Lord has always been single and has no wife, his foster son naturally became the 9 Brilliant Star Lord's only son. He's known as the Young Star Lord. A few years later, it just happens to be the Young Star Lord's 1,000th birthday. As a result, many peak organizations in the Saints' world have arranged for their juniors to travel across the distant space to the Star Brilliance Plane to celebrate the Young Star Lord's birthday. The 1,000th birthday of the 9 Brilliant Star Lord's foster son has already attracted so many peak organizations in the Saints' world to offer gifts. It looks like the 9 Brilliant Star Lord must be a renowned figure. Sigh, it's all my master's fault. He didn't tell me about the great figures of the Saints' world at all. So I don't even know who the 9 Brilliant Star Lord is, Jianqin sighed. Yi Jianping chuckled when he heard that. He said, "The 9 Brilliant Star Lord is one of the supreme experts of the Saints' world. He's so powerful that he's already a 9th Heavenly Layer Grand Prime. He's in existence only second to Grand Exalts." Chapter 2475. What? The 9 Brilliant Star Lord is actually the disciple of a Grand Exalt, and the disciple of the Blood Tier Grand Exalt? Jianqin's heart shuddered. The disciple of a Grand Exalt was definitely the most dazzling figure in the Saints' world. Moreover, what surprised him even more was that they were actually master and disciple of the Blood Tier Grand Exalt. Jianqin had personally faced the Blood Tier Grand Exalt on the desolate plain. The feeling of not being able to hide anything from a Grand Exalt still made Jianqin shiver. Grand Exalts were just too powerful. They could not be compared to the Grand Primes who pursued him on the desolate plain. Even though Jianqin had broken through to the 14th layer of the chaotic body and his strength had skyrocketed, he had a strong feeling that he would still be the same as before when he faced Grand Exalts with his current strength. He would not even be able to lift a finger. As soon as he thought about the blood-tear Grand Exalt who had appeared on the desolate plain, Jianqin could not help but become doubtful. He was certain that the blood-tear Grand Exalt had discovered the sword spirits hidden on him. Logically speaking, the Grand Exalt should not have spared him now that his identity had been exposed. After all, the sword spirits had killed many experts of the Saints' world in the hands of their previous master. However, in reality, the blood-tear Grand Exalt did not make things difficult for him. As a matter of fact, he did not even say anything before leaving mysteriously. He even left behind the corpse of the strongest existence among the 3 dark gold ape kings, Gusta's corpse. This left Jianqin extremely confused. Fellow Yang Yutian. At this moment, Fa Yun spoke up. He looked at Jianqin, but he stopped himself. He hesitated. Jianqin dismissed his thoughts and cast the matter of the blood-tear Grand Exalt to the back of his head. He glanced at Fa Yun and smiled. Fa Yun, do you want to buy that god artifact? Fa Yun nodded. He was eager, but Jianqin's price was just too high. It was 5,000 5-colored divine crystals. This was not something he could afford. Even if he borrowed some from the other subjects of the Float Empire, it would be very difficult for him to gather it. Jianqin pondered for a moment and said, Fa Yun, if you want that divine tool, wait until the auction is over. Jianqin also knew how precious 5-colored divine crystals were. It was indeed unrealistic for a regular primordial realm expert without a particularly great background to take out 5,000 of them all at once. He planned on selling them to Fa Yun at a slightly cheaper price after the auction ended and the god artifact went unsold. Although he was still unable to confirm the true value of a low-quality god artifact, as long as he could gather enough 5-colored divine crystals as soon as possible, it would be fine even if he suffered a little loss. The Star Brilliance plane had the 9 Brilliant Star Lord, and the 9 Brilliant Star Lord was connected to the blood-tear Grand Exalt. Jianqin did not want to stay on the Star Brilliance plane for long. Afterwards, Jianqin chatted with the subjects of the Float Empire for a while before leaving. This was because the auction in the spatial battleship that had been temporarily suspended was about to continue. Soon after Jianqin's departure, the spectral elder, who sat on a jade bed in a luxurious cabin, suddenly opened his eyes. An extremely obscure senses of the soul extended down from the top floor of the spatial battleship, sending a message to the spectral elder. The spectral elder's face immediately changed when he received the message. He stood up in a hurry and went to find Audiobook. It's bad. A subject of the Float Empire has sent me a message. The person who auctioned the god artifact is called Yang Yutian. His background is extremely terrifying. According to our estimations, the person behind him is not someone any organization in our jade fluid plane can afford to offend. The spectral elder said sternly, What? Are you sure that's true? Audiobook was surprised when he heard that. Although he was arrogant, that was only before people whose backgrounds were not as great as his. Once he encountered people he could not afford to offend, he would not dare to act recklessly. He could only shrink back. The spectral elder nodded with great certainty. He had guessed that Jianqin's origins were probably astonishing long ago. The information he had received from the subjects of the Float Empire further confirmed his guess. He did not doubt it at all. This was because both the shocking battle prowess Jianqin had displayed and the secret technique he had used to kill so many golden sword beasts in a single instance clearly demonstrated his extraordinariness. Regular primordial realm experts could not grasp these methods. We need to find a way to make up for it. There should still be time. The spectral elder murmured softly. He already had an idea. Before long, the auction that had been temporarily suspended due to the attacks of the Golden Sword beasts finally restarted. They continued with what they had not completed before. Very soon, the auction hall was filled with cultivators again. Even though there were fewer people than before, there was still a sea of people. The low-quality god artifact, Jianqin, had taken out for auction was placed back on the stage. Our Darkness clan bids 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. However, as soon as the god artifact appeared and before the auctioneer's voice could be heard, an old voice rang out from the box of the Darkness clan. It was the spectral elder's voice. As soon as he spoke, he added another 1,000 five-colored divine crystals to Jianqin's starting bid. The auction hall immediately fell silent. At this moment, all the cultivators in the auction hall looked towards the VIP box where the Darkness clan was seated. They were extremely shocked. Before this, the Darkness clan had been arrogant. They secretly controlled the auction in an attempt to obtain the god artifact with a starting bid of 100 five-colored divine crystals. This scene was witnessed by everyone present. Yet now, the Darkness clan had suddenly changed. They offered 6,000 five-colored divine crystals right off the bat, which was even higher than the starting bid of the owner of the god artifact. This abnormal action left all the cultivators in the auction hall confused. This was because this was not how the Darkness clan usually did things. Jianqin, who also sat in a box, was slightly surprised when he heard the Darkness clan's bid. He had already prepared himself to sell the god artifact to Fa Yun at a lower price after it went unsold. He had never thought that the Darkness clan would actually do something like this. This left him rather unprepared. The primordial realm expert of the Darkness clan has probably been frightened by you, so he's trying to get on your good side. Kea covered her mouth as she sat before Jianqin. Jianqin nodded with a smile when he heard that. He said, "That works too. With these five-colored divine crystals, we don't need to stay on the star brilliance plane at all. We can directly go to the Shangzhou plane through the interplanar teleportation formation." In the end, Jianqin's low-quality god artifact was purchased by the Darkness clan for 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. With the end of the auction, all the peak organizations on the spatial battleship gathered towards the Darkness clan's box. They passed out space rings one after another. At the same time, 2 of the 6 great guardians of the Float Empire had arrived as well. They also handed a space ring to the Spectral Elder. Neither the Spectral Elder nor Anya Geo could take out 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. As a result, the Spectral Elder had personally stepped forward to gather the 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. He had basically borrowed the entire spatial battleship in the name of the Darkness clan. Only then did he manage to gather it. P.S. Recently, many of you have asked how long it has been since a certain website was updated. Xiaoyao will explain that Xiaoyao is only responsible for updating the main website right now. The updates of the other websites are actually synchronized with the main website. Xiaoyao is unable to interfere with the updates of the other websites apart from the main website. In order for you to see when the book is updated and how it is updated as soon as possible, please take a few minutes to follow Xiaoyao's public account so that you won't be affected by the lack of updates on the other websites. Search Xingxingxiao 110. Pinyin was the pseudonym of Xinqing Xiaoyao. There was also a number for the police, or you could directly search for Xinqing Xiaoyao on the public account. Chapter 2476. The low-quality god artifact was purchased by the Darkness clan for 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. No one had expected this result. Afterwards, they began to wonder about the identity of the owner of the god artifact. Many peak clans from the Jade Fluid Plane gathered on the spatial battleship. Although many of them did not know about the battle prowess Jianqin had displayed in the battle against the Golden Sword beasts, They were not idiots. They could sense something important from the abnormal actions of the Darkness clan. The person who had auctioned off the god artifact had such a great background that even the Darkness clan, which ranked third on the Jade Fluid plane, did not dare to provoke them. When this conclusion came out, it immediately shocked many people from the top forces to the point that they felt extremely nervous and uneasy. In the past, many of them had threatened Jianqin. Yet now, Jianqin actually made the Darkness clan so fearful, to the point where they did not dare to offend him. The people from the Peak clans felt like they had made a huge mistake. On the top floor of the spatial battleship, the subject of the Float Empire, Fa Yun, was frowning as well. He was unable to conceal his disappointment. Originally, he had already heard from Jianqin that Jianqin would sell the god artifact to him at a lower price after the god artifact was sold off. He had been overjoyed the entire time. After all, as a primordial realm expert, he still did not possess a god artifact. Now that he had encountered one after so much difficulty, and it was a huge sword that suited him extremely well, it made his blood boil with excitement. A god artifact could increase his battle prowess by a lot, allowing him to become even more powerful. As a result, he would gain a greater status among the subjects of the Float Empire. However, in the end, he never thought that the Darkness clan would actually express goodwill towards Jianqin, purchasing the god artifact for 6,000 five-colored divine crystals. He had missed out on the god artifact by a hair's breadth, which made him extremely irritated. Fa Yun, don't be dejected. You're a subject of the Float Empire. The Float Empire doesn't lack god artifacts. Once you contribute enough to the Float Empire, you'll be able to exchange for a god artifact that suits you. A primordial realm expert beside Fa Yun comforted him. Fa Yun sighed softly. He had long thought about exchanging contribution points for divine artifacts, but that would have to wait for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. He spent most of his time on the spatial battleship, acting as its guardian. He would often engage in battles with the various astral beasts in space. No one could say for sure when he would fall. Naturally, the sooner he got his hands on this divine artifact, the better. That was because the stronger he was, the longer he could live. Sirs, Senior Yang Yutian has arrived. At this moment, a guard's voice came from outside. Invite him in, a primordial realm subject immediately said. Jianqin's current status had changed drastically in the hearts of the Float Dynasty's consecrators. There were even 2 or 3 consecrators who didn't bother to hide their respect, mixed with a bit of flattery. Very soon, Jianqin walked in from outside. Behind him was the white-robed Kea. His arrival immediately made the subjects of the Float Empire stand up to receive him. None of them dared to slack off. Even the strongest expert on the spatial battleship, Yijian Pain, had hurried over from elsewhere. Fa Yun, although I did not expect the Darkness clan to buy the god artifact, there's no need to worry. I still have more god artifacts. After exchanging some pleasantries, Jianqin cut straight to the chase. He took out another god artifact from his space ring. It was also a low-quality god artifact, but it was not a huge sword. Instead, it was a spear. Jianqin had obtained these god artifacts from the Azure Poseidon Palace in the past. The hearts of the subjects of the Float Empire all jumped when they saw how Jianqin could take out a god artifact so easily. Wasn't there just too many god artifacts? However, as soon as they thought about Jianqin's identity and origins, they understood. As for Fa Yin, his heart immediately burned with desire when he heard that Jianqin still had a god artifact. However, when he saw that the god artifact was not a sword that he was proficient in but a spear, he immediately became disappointed. He was like a deflated balloon. He was not skilled in spears. Even with this god artifact, he was unable to unleash his battle prowess to the greatest extent. Jianqin held the spear and said to Fa Yin, "Although this god artifact isn't a huge sword, it's of the same grade as the huge sword. You can take this god artifact to trade with the people of the Darkness clan." Fa Yan's eyes immediately lit up when he heard that. He asked urgently, "Fellow Yang Yutian, may I ask how much you plan on selling this god artifact for?" Afterwards, Jianqin haggled with Fa Yin. In the end, Jianqin decided to sell the spear to Fa Yin for 3,000 five-colored divine crystals. Fa Yin borrowed over 2,000 five-colored divine crystals from the other 5 subjects. Only then did he manage to gather 3,000 and buy Jianqin's god artifact. Jianqin obtained 9,000 five-colored divine crystals from the 2 low-quality god artifacts. As for the auction, they did not charge Jianqin any commission because of what had happened earlier. Jianqin returned to his cabin with the 9,000 five-colored divine crystals with him and Kea. His current cabin was no longer the high-class cabin from before. Instead, it was a luxury cabin provided by the subjects of the Float Empire for free. Jianqin, 6,000 five-colored divine crystals is enough for us to take a teleportation formation to the Shenzhou Plain. Why did you sell a second god artifact? God artifacts are treasures that can only be stumbled upon, Kea asked in confusion as soon as they returned to the cabin. It's for my sister. She needs an extremely tremendous amount of cultivation resources to recover her cultivation. With Protector Shui's strength, even if she breaks through to the primordial realm, she won't be able to find a lot of cultivation resources in a short amount of time. Since I have the ability now, I naturally have to find a way to prepare some for my sister. These god artifacts are useless in my hands. It's better for me to turn them into cultivation resources so that my sister can recover her cultivation as soon as possible. If it weren't for the fact that there are just too few primordial realm experts on the spatial battleship, I'd be tempted to sell all my god artifacts, Jianqin said. He had already learnt from Protector Shui that his sister, Changyang Mingyue, had some grievances with the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing in the past. As a result, he did not dare to ask the First Majesty to help his sister when he returned the Inata Tower to the Shenzhou Plain. As a matter of fact, he did not even dare to reveal any information about his sister to the First Majesty. After all, he did not know the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing. He was afraid that the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing would make things worse for his sister after learning about her situation. As a result, he could only rely on himself if he wanted his sister to recover her strength as soon as possible. There's still a few years before the spatial battleship arrives on the Star Brilliance Plain. As soon as we arrive, we'll leave through the interplanar teleportation formation and head to the Shenzhou Plain, thought Jianqin. With the sale of the 2 low-quality god artifacts, he now had enough 5-colored divine crystals to use the interplanar teleportation formation. However, at this moment, a great sense of danger suddenly appeared in Jianqin's head. It immediately made Jianqin uneasy. Oh no, we're probably in trouble. Jianqin's heart leapt as he became extremely stern. He did not know where the sense of danger came from, but he knew very well that ever since his soul had changed after fusing with a strand of chaotic force, his senses had become extraordinarily powerful. Now that he had sensed danger, he knew that great danger was approaching. Chapter 2477. Kea, we can't stay on this spatial battleship for long. We need to leave. We need to leave immediately. Jianqin made a prompt decision and left with Kea. He found the subjects of the Float Empire again. Fellow Yang Yutian, what did you say? You want to leave the spatial battleship right now. A subject was immediately stunned when he learnt why Jianqin had come. Although primordial realm experts could move through outer space, it was definitely not as safe as staying on a spatial battleship. Moreover, the spatial battleship was much faster than infinite primes. It was impossible for anyone below chaotic primes to catch up. They were about to reach the Star Brilliance Plain, yet Jianqin wanted to leave. This confused the subject of the Float Empire. I have matters to attend to, so I won't be going to the Star Brilliance Plain, Jianqin said indifferently. He did not explain any further. Formations enveloped the spatial battleship as it flew through outer space, sealing off the entire ship. If he wanted to leave, he needed the subjects of the Float Empire to order the ship to stop and open up the formations. "If that's the case, please take care of yourself," the subject said without hesitation. The subject did not say anything else. He immediately ordered the battleship to stop and open the formations so that the two of them could leave. If it were anyone else, they definitely would not have made such a request, as not only would the spatial battleship waste quite a lot of time, but it would also consume quite a lot of energy when it sped up again. However, Jianchen's identity was extraordinary in the eyes of the subjects. Coupled with his strength, it was impossible for them to stop him. As a result, the subjects of the Float Empire naturally did not dare to turn down his request. Jianchen and Kea left the spatial battleship before taking out a small spatial battleship from their space rings. They quickly flew off in another direction and vanished very soon. Half a day after Jianchen and Kea left, the huge ship of the Float Empire suddenly shuddered. The space around the spatial battleship suddenly froze, as if it had been compressed by a tremendous force. As the spatial battleship flew through the air, it immediately felt like it had fallen into a swamp. It encountered a great obstruction and gradually slowed down. Soon, it came to a complete stop. In the next moment, a blue ocean suddenly appeared in the void. It looked like a vast sea. Endless seawater was churning, stirring up monstrous waves. The ocean appeared in outer space just like that, enveloping the spatial battleship. The spatial battleship seemed like a lone boat before the strange ocean. It seemed so insignificant, and in a single moment it was swallowed up by the blue ocean, vanishing without a trace. At that moment, if one were to look from afar, they would discover that the blue ocean had formed a huge sphere, trapping the spatial battleship within. The ocean was not ordinary ocean water. Instead, it was condensed from terrifying energy and the power of laws. It gave off a tremendous pressure. Just the pressure alone caused the protective formations around the spatial battleship to tremble violently, shrinking rapidly from the pressure. The 6 primordial realm experts of the Float Empire sensed the changes outside as soon as possible on the top floor of the spatial battleship. Their faces all changed drastically, becoming filled with fear and shock. Even Giant Pain had lost his usual calmness, his expression becoming unprecedentedly solemn. "We're from the Float Empire on the Jade Fluid Plane. Senior, please show mercy." The 6 experts cried out together and arrived on the deck as soon as possible. "We're from the Darkness Clan on the Jade Fluid Plane. The young master of our Darkness Clan, Anyajio, is on the spatial battleship right now. Senior, please show mercy." The spectral elder of the Darkness Clan rushed out as soon as possible and reported his identity. "We're from the Myriad Water Manor on the Jade Fluid Plane." At the same time, all the peak clans on the spatial battleship received a message from Giant Pain and the others. They all arrived on the deck as quickly as they could and reported their origins. Immediately, all the primordial realm experts and the representatives of the various peak organizations gathered on the deck of the spatial battleship. They looked at the blue ocean that surrounded the spatial battleship, and all of their faces paled. From this ocean, they could clearly sense a terrifying pressure that made their souls tremble. A figure emerged from the blue ocean. He stood with his hands behind his back, and his entire being seemed to have merged with the vast ocean. He was an old man with an aquiline nose and inch-long hair. He stared at the spatial battleship below as undisguised excitement filled his old eyes. The old man was the elder of mountains and seas. However, the elder of mountains and seas seemed rather haggard, as if he was not in his peak condition right now. Instead, he was injured. Clearly, the elder of mountains and seas had been injured in the battle against the golden sword beast. Jianchen, the old man has finally caught up to you. As long as I can capture you and take the Inata Tower from you, it'll be worth it, even if the old man is injured by the golden sword beast, thought the elder of mountains and seas. He had used his innate ability to follow Jianqin and catch up to the spatial battleship. He was extremely confident that Jianqin was on the spatial battleship. "Senior, we're going to the Star Brilliance plane to celebrate the young star, Lord's birthday. If you kill us here, not only will you be slapping the young Star Lord's face, but you'll be robbing the young Star Lord of his birthday gift as well." Someone called out from the spatial battleship in hopes of making the Elder of Mountains and Seas back off. Offending the young Star Lord was no different from offending the 9 Brilliant Star Lord. Who was the 9 Brilliant Star Lord? Not only was he the first disciple of the Blood Tier Grand Exalt, but his cultivation had also reached the peak. He had reached the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime long ago. He was one of the most powerful experts below Grand Exalt. Don't worry. The old man isn't interested in you. The old man is looking for someone, chuckled the Elder of Mountains and Seas. May I ask who Senior is looking for? I'll hand him over immediately, said a primordial realm subject of the Float Empire. The Elder of Mountains and Seas shook his head and smiled strangely. You really won't be able to find this person. Only the old man can pull him out from the sea of people. With that, the Elder of Mountains and Seas closed his eyes. He used his innate ability again to sense Jianqin's exact location. There were just too many cultivators on the spatial battleship, and Jianqin was concealed by a secret treasure. As a result, the Elder of Mountains and Seas was unable to tell which cultivator was Jianqin. He could only use his innate ability. But very soon, the Elder of Mountains and Seas' expression changed slightly. He suddenly turned his head and looked in another direction. His sharp gaze seemed to be able to pierce through space, peering into the depths of the endless sea of stars. What a devious brat. He's actually not on the ship. But since Old Man has his eyes on you, you're doomed, the Elder of Mountains and Seas said through gritted teeth. He did not remain for even a moment, vanishing in a single instant. With his departure, the endless ocean around the spatial battleship vanished as well. The terrifying pressure vanished in a single moment as well. All the cultivators on the deck let out a sigh of relief when the spatial battleship broke free. They felt like they had just survived a disaster. Grand Prime. That Senior earlier was a Grand Prime. Giant Pain stared in the direction the Elder of Mountains and Seas had vanished in sternly. Grand Prime? But who is he looking for? It looks like this person has definitely come with ill intentions, the spectral elder of the Darkness clan said sternly. Chapter 2478. Giant Pain and the subjects of the Float Empire all looked over, and their eyes narrowed slightly. They had not paid too much attention before, but with F.A. Yun's reminder, they really did discover that the Elder of Mountains and Seas had traveled off in the same direction as the mysterious Yan Yutian. At that moment, all the primordial realm experts on the spatial battleship thought the same thing. The terrifying Grand Prime had gone off to hunt down Yang Yutian. Moreover, the Grand Prime had come with ill intentions. His face was cold, so it was extremely likely that he wanted to kill Jianqin. This has nothing to do with us. Let's return, start the ship, and continue on our way. At this moment, Giant Pain waved his hand and turned around to leave. With his departure, the primordial realm experts of the Float Empire and the people from the various peak organizations gathered on the deck all returned to their cabins. Yan Yutian, good luck. F.A. Yun glanced in the general direction Jianqin had left in deeply. After murmuring to himself, he also vanished from the deck. Jianqin had sold him a god artifact at a relatively low price, and he had used the low-quality god artifact to successfully trade for the two-handed sword from the Darkness clan. He finally possessed a low-quality god artifact that belonged to him, so he felt some gratitude towards Jianqin. Now, it was extremely likely that Jianqin would be hunted down by a Grand Prime, so all he could do was pray for Jianqin silently. At this moment, a small spatial battleship that was only 30 meters long shot through the dark space as a streak of silver light. It flew through the air rapidly. Jianchen and Kea were stern as they steered the spatial battleship forward as quickly as they could. A meter-wide, supreme, gray divine crystal was placed on a formation on the spatial battleship. The tremendous energy within the supreme gray divine crystal was constantly absorbed by the formation, providing the spatial battleship with the greatest propulsion and allowing it to fly quickly. This was a block of supreme-grade divine crystal, which was equivalent to 1,000,000 standard-sized divine crystals. In the eyes of many divine king, this block of supreme-grade divine crystal was a great fortune that could not be ignored. However, Jianchen had used it to power the spatial battleship without any hesitation. The sense of danger is getting stronger and stronger. I wonder who's chasing us from behind, Jianchen said in a deep voice as he stared ahead. Although he did not see who was chasing after him, he firmly believed in the warning signs in his heart. We've already left the spaceship, but the person behind us is still chasing after us. It's almost certain that he's coming for us. His target is naturally not me but you. Kea stared at Jianchen. At this moment, her senses were even clearer than Jianchen's. She could vaguely sense that there was indeed a powerful aura rapidly approaching them from extremely far behind them. Furthermore, she could even vaguely sense the exact location of the person who had come. It felt like her soul had completely fused with the vast space. Even Jianchen's senses paled in comparison to hers. However, this ability did not accompany her at all times. Instead, it came and went from time to time. Furthermore, she discovered that other than the increase in her sensing ability, her own strength did not change in the slightest. But I wear a mask that hides all of my presence. Even if some peak experts stand before me, they won't be able to see through my identity. How did the person behind us find me? Moreover, I'm already so far away from the desolate plain. Jianchen was puzzled as well. He was perplexed no matter how hard he thought about it. After all, he had used the mask to hide for several years on the desolate plain. All the Grand Primes were helpless against him. Why was he suddenly targeted as soon as he left the desolate plain? Those peak experts are all extremely powerful. They have endless methods. Even if you wear a mask, it's not invulnerable. Perhaps they have some methods that can bypass your mask and find you in the sea of people, said Kea. However, just when he reached there, Kea suddenly cried out in surprise. A strange light appeared in his eyes. What's wrong? Jianchen looked at Kea. A strange light appeared in Kea's eyes. She said softly, "The person pursuing us has deviated. He's following the path we took when we left the spatial battleship. He's moving in a straight line. He hasn't changed directions. You can sense the person's exact location?" Jianchen's eyes lit up. He already knew that Kea's senses were so great that even the Inata Tower was unable to isolate her. However, he had never thought it would be so astonishing. This was because even he was unable to sense the expert's exact location, yet Kea could. Her ability was just too shocking. Kea nodded. That person has stopped. The light in Jianchen's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. However, a while later, Kea's face changed slightly. He cried out softly, "Oh no, that person has moved. He's heading towards where we are right now. He can pinpoint our exact location." With that, Jianchen immediately steered the spatial battleship in another direction. An hour later, Kea's voice rang out. "That person has passed by where we were before," but he did not stop. Instead, he continued to fly ahead, getting further and further away from us. Jianchen secretly thought that Kea's senses were far greater than he had imagined. After all, even his soul, which had fused with a strand of true chaotic force, was unable to sense the person's existence from such a great distance. You're right. That person does have a wondrous method. He can bypass the concealment of our masks and find us in the vast outer space, Jianchen said sternly. He was extremely stern. That person has stopped again. He's heading in our direction again. Afterwards, Kea constantly reminded him, paying attention to the person's location at all times. Jianqin changed his direction time and time again as well. After changing directions several times, Jianqin finally confirmed one thing, which was that the mysterious expert behind them could not sense their location at all times. Instead, he had to stop every once in a while and use some unknown secret technique to determine their exact location again. However, even with that being the case, the distance between them gradually closed because the mysterious expert was just too fast. Jianqin's small spatial battleship was nowhere near the size of larger spatial battleships, so it was naturally impossible for him to escape. Why do I feel like this ability is similar to He Ye's innate ability? Jianqin thought before immediately letting out He Ye with a thought. He Ye was already a primordial realm expert now, so he naturally saw Jianqin as soon as he emerged. As Jianqin wore a mask, both his appearance and figure had changed, so he failed to recognize Jianqin at first glance. He was slightly surprised. He Ye, immediately use your innate ability and see if you can sense my location. Jianqin cut to the chase and directly said to He Ye, your master. He Ye immediately confirmed Jianqin's identity as soon as he spoke. All right, I'll try. Afterwards, He Ye closed his eyes and began to use his innate ability. Jianqin stared at He Ye without blinking. He knew that as long as He Ye glanced at someone, He Ye could use his innate ability to find them no matter where they were. Chapter 2479. A while later, He Ye stopped using his innate ability. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Jianqin hesitantly. He said, Master, I can only sense your rough location, and when I sense your location, it's not accurate at all. It's as if my innate ability has been affected by a mysterious power, making me feel like I'm looking at a blur. It's not as easy as other people. Perhaps it's because Master's strength has increased, which is why my senses are blurry. My innate ability isn't effective on everyone. Once I encounter people who are far more powerful than me, my innate ability probably won't be effective at all. Hey, yeah, is there any way to avoid your innate ability? Jianqin asked. Now he had basically confirmed that the mysterious expert pursuing them was probably a fellow clansman of He Ye, possessing the same ability as He Ye. He Ye's sense of his location was very blurry, which definitely had something to do with his strength. However, the person pursuing them was a peak expert. With his level of cultivation, it would naturally be a piece of cake for him to sense his location. He Ye frowned and thought for a while before shaking his head, expressing that he did not know. A smear of disappointment appeared in Jianqin's eyes. He sent He Ye back into the divine hall. Although He Ye was also a primordial realm expert now, he was still useless in a situation like this. Jianqin, the mysterious expert, is getting closer and closer to us. Once we enter the range of the senses of his soul, he'll be able to lock onto our exact location. He'll catch up to us instantly, Kea said. There was a sliver of worry in his voice. Right now, they were well beyond the range of the senses of a regular Grand Prime soul from the Elder of Mountains and Seas. As a result, the Elder of Mountains and Seas was unable to pinpoint Jianqin's exact location with the terrifying senses of his soul that could envelop an entire plane. He could only constantly use his innate ability to sense them. However, if they drew closer and the senses of the Elder of Mountains and Seas' soul locked onto them, the Elder of Mountains and Seas would be able to cross an entire plane and stop Jianqin and Kea in a short while with his cultivation as a Grand Prime. The only thing we can do now is to leave this world and enter the crack in space, Jianqin said coldly. His eyes were filled with determination. Afterwards, he left the small spatial battleship and appeared in outer space. He wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, and with a resplendent flash of light, he cut open a meter-long crack in space. Let's go, Jianqin called out. He put away the 9-star sword of heavenly ways and entered the crack with Kea. Terrifying streams of energy and temporal vortices filled the spatial crack. It was extremely dangerous. Even primordial realm experts would face the danger of dying if they entered. Jianchen became cautious after entering the spatial crack. Even though he had reached the 14th layer of the chaotic body and possessed battle prowess equivalent to a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime, he still did not dare to act recklessly here. I hope we can shake him off here, thought Jianchen. Afterwards, he took out the Inata Tower and entered it with Kea. With how tough the Inata Tower was, they advanced through the spatial crack at full speed. Probably only a peak god artifact like the Inata Tower could truly move about fearlessly in a dangerous place like the spatial crack. Soon after Jianchen and Kea entered the spatial crack, the Elder of Mountains and Seas appeared where Jianchen and Kea had vanished from. He closed his eyes and sensed for a while. A smear of surprise appeared on his face as he murmured, "He's actually vanished. I can't sense his location anymore." It looks like he really did sense Old Man's pursuit, which is why he constantly changed directions. However, how did he know that this old man was chasing after him? The Elder of Mountains and Seas gradually smiled coldly, but no matter how he sensed Old Man's pursuit, it's impossible for him to escape from Old Man. With that, the Elder of Mountains and Seas' gaze immediately became extremely deep. Laws interwove in his eyes as the ways changed, becoming mysterious and unfathomable. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the origin of time, peek into the past and future, and comprehend the supreme mysteries of the world. It was as if all the secrets of the world were clearly displayed in his eyes. The Elder of Mountains and Seas was a Grand Prime. His comprehension of laws had reached an extremely profound level. Even though he was nowhere close to Grand Exalts, who were existences akin to the laws of the world, he was still extremely powerful. He possessed various unbelievable abilities and methods. Very soon, the Elder of Mountains and Seas' gaze returned to normal. He seemed to have found where Jianchen and Kea had gone. He sneered and also ripped open space, entering the spatial crack. The Elder of Mountains and Seas could still sense Jianchen's location within the spatial crack. However, due to the chaotic laws and the extremely harsh environment, his senses were affected quite a lot. As a result, it took him a little longer to sense Jianchen's location every time compared to outside. Up ahead, Jianchen and Kea were in the Inata Tower. They moved as quickly as they could as they constantly changed directions. That person's speed is definitely not as fast as the Azure Pern King. I hope we can shake him off here, Jianchen thought, but very soon he felt a sense of danger again. This made his heart sink. He understood that he had been targeted again. Afterwards, he immediately controlled the Inata Tower to charge towards the most dangerous places, towards the temporal vortices. He could still clearly remember that this was how he had shaken off the Azure Peng King's pursuit last time. Immediately, the Inata Tower turned into a golden streak of light, piercing through temporal vortices one after another. Although Jianchen's idea was good, the Elder of Mountains and Seas behind him was not the Azure Peng King after all. Whenever the Elder of Mountains and Seas came across a temporal vortex, he would choose to avoid it nimbly. He was not like the Azure Peng King, who recklessly charged through them. With his cultivation as a Grand Prime, the temporal vortices that filled the spatial cracks would not be able to do anything to him if he purposefully avoided them. Even if he could not avoid them, the Elder of Mountains and Seas would choose to take a detour. With his speed, even if he took a detour, it would not take up much of his time. At most, it would only take him slightly longer to catch up to Jianchen. Compared to the Azure Peng King, the Elder of Mountains and Seas was clearly even more cautious. As a result, Jianchen's method was not particularly effective. The distance between him and the Elder of Mountains and Seas continued to shrink bit by bit. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the Elder of Mountains and Seas caught up. At the same time, on the Prosper Plain of the 49 Great Plains of the Saints' World, a figure sat in the air in the depths of a majestic palace in the central region of the Prosper Plain. Around his body, endless light of the great path drowned him, causing his figure to be blurry and hazy. It was impossible to see him clearly. However, a terrifying aura that caused the world to tremble faintly emanated from this person's body. He was merely sitting cross-legged in the void, but it felt as if the entire world, was being suppressed beneath his feet. It was as if he was the supreme ruler of the world. It was as if he was the only god in the world. At this moment, he slowly opened his eyes, revealing a pair of cold, emotionless eyes. He stared ahead indifferently. The space before him suddenly twisted, and a mirror suddenly appeared in the empty space. The mirror displayed the elder of mountains and seas and gentians' pursuit through the spatial cracks. Whether it was the Anita Tower that constantly changed directions or the elder of mountains and seas who pursued them, they all appeared clearly in the mirror. The cold gaze landed on the Anita Tower. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the Anita Tower, allowing him to see everything inside clearly. "The fruit of ways is about to ripen," he murmured. His voice contained all the rhythms in the world, making it impossible to tell whether he was male or female. Chapter 2480. Within the spatial crack, the damaged Anita Tower had already shrunk to the size of a fist. It moved as quickly as it could. No matter how powerful the streams of energy were, or how terrifying the temporal vortices were, the Anita Tower did not avoid them at all. It moved through them as a faint, golden streak of light. Moreover, it would specially go wherever there was danger. In this chaotic space where even primordial realm experts had to be cautious, the Anita Tower was truly fearless. It rampaged around like a raging bull. Nothing could stop it. The laws within the spatial crack were incomplete. The 5 elements were reversed, and yin and yang were in chaos. There was no order at all. It was impossible to sense the flow of time in there. Jianqin and Kea had no idea how long they had fled and how many dangerous places they had passed through. However, the sense of danger that lingered in Jianqin's heart remained the entire time. This allowed Jianqin to understand that he had not shaken off the peak expert chasing after him. Instead, the distance between them was closing bit by bit. "Let's go. Let's go." Jianqin knew that this could not continue. He made a prompt decision and immediately left the Anita Tower. Wielding the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, he swung it down as hard as he could under the illumination of countless stars. Immediately, the space before him distorted violently, ripping open a crack. Powerful pulses of energy spread out with sword chi, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. At that moment, the turbulent space immediately became even more chaotic due to the disturbance. Many streams of energy shot out in all directions, striking Jianqin with terrifying power that could even make primordial realm experts pale. However, Jianqin only shook a few times. The streams of energy that even primordial realm experts needed to avoid temporarily failed to injure Jianqin at all. The 14th layer of the chaotic body had bestowed Jianqin with unimaginable defenses. Even though the streams of energy were very powerful, they were still extremely powerful. The streams of energy were extremely powerful, and they could even heavily injure some primordial realm experts. However, they were not strong enough to get through Jianqin's chaotic body. Jianqin did not care about the streams of energy that struck him. He grabbed the fist-sized Anita Tower and entered the crack with a flash without any hesitation, returning to the saint's world. Afterwards, he took out the small spaceship again and continued on his way. Kea emerged from the Anita Tower as well. He stood in the spaceship with Jianqin, constantly sensing the experts behind them. "The person behind us will probably catch up very soon. He has a secret technique that can find my location, so we can't shake him off. All we can do now is find a planar teleportation formation and get to the Shengoff the Saint Realm as soon as possible," Jianqin said sternly before immediately taking out a star chart. He searched for the nearest planar teleportation formation. The star chart clearly marked the locations of the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets of the Saint's World, as well as the regions where powerful space beasts resided. Although it was not comprehensive, It was like a beacon of light in the darkness to Jianchen. It was extremely useful. The closest place to us is actually the star brilliance plane. It's just a little closer. Jianchen found his location very soon. He immediately adjusted his direction and advanced in a straight line. The peace only lasted for a very short period of time. After traveling for 3 days in peace, Kaya warned them again, and Jianchen also sensed danger. He knew that the expert had locked onto their location again. He immediately used the same trick again, entering the spatial crack and hiding in the Anita Tower with Kaya. He used the Anita Tower to move around. This Jianchen really is a little loach. He's very slippery. A while later, the Elder of Mountains and Seas appeared where Jianchen had vanished. He stared at the space where Jianchen had vanished and gritted his teeth. He simply could not understand how Jianchen knew he was chasing after them when he had concealed his presence and purposefully hidden his tracks. It's a pity that the old man can't lock onto you with the senses of his soul. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for you to escape from under the old man's nose with your strength, the Elder of Mountains and Seas said viciously. The Elder of Mountains and Seas said resentfully. Although he was a Grand Prime and the senses of his soul were extremely powerful, he always maintained a distance that exceeded the range of his senses. Moreover, all secret techniques related to divination were useless on Jianchen. As a result, he was unable to find Jianchen's tracks without using his innate secret technique. However, by the time he arrived at Jianchen's location with his innate secret technique, Jianchen had already changed directions. If he continued to pursue in a straight line, it was extremely likely that he would deviate from Jianchen's path, causing the distance between him and Jianchen to widen. As a result, he was forced to stop every once in a while to sense Jianchen's location again. As a result, it became extremely difficult for him, a peak Grand Prime, to chase after Jianchen, who was only an infinite prime in outer space. Suddenly, space ripped open. The Elder of Mountains and Seas followed behind Jianchen, entering the spatial crack again. They continued their pursuit in the harsh environment of the spatial crack. Jianchen sensed the Elder of Mountains and Seas soon after he entered. He was unable to locate the Elder of Mountains and Seas, but the sense of danger intensified. This time he was much calmer. He clearly became much more composed. He controlled the Anita Tower to continue traveling in the same way as before without becoming flustered. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. Up ahead, he discovered a corpse drifting over slowly. Even though the corpse no longer gave off any signs of life, it still gave off a heavy pressure. Under Jianchen's control, the Anita Tower stopped before the corpse. Jianchen dragged the corpse into the tower before continuing on his way. The corpse that Jianchen had dragged and lay on the ground stiffly within the Anita Tower. It was a middle-aged man with 4 eyes. Clearly, he was from another race. There was a finger-sized, bloody hole between his eyebrows that ran through his entire head. Clearly, his soul had been wiped out. A 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. Jianchen's heart shook slightly as he studied the corpse. He immediately determined the man's cultivation. He was actually at the same level as Giant Pain from the spatial battleship. He was an expert at the same level of cultivation. What shocked him even more was that the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime seemed to have killed him in a single strike. Even a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime could be killed in a single strike. So just how powerful was the person who killed him? Chaotic Prime, or Grand Prime. However, Jianchen did not care about that. He looked at the corpse's finger and the space ring on his index finger. Although the primordial realm expert was dead, his space ring had not been taken away. The light in Jianchen's eyes flickered a few times. He slowly removed the space ring and sent the senses of his soul inside. Immediately, the space ring was filled with a myriad of items before Jianchen. The person who had died was clearly extremely wealthy. There were countless divine pills, divine-level natural treasures, and other treasures. They were piled up in such a large area. There were even over 3,000 five-colored divine crystals. At this moment, Jianshin's eyes suddenly narrowed. With a flip of his hand, he took out a palm-sized medallion from the space ring. The medallion was completely white, and it shone with the faint light of the moon. A huge moon was engraved on it. What truly caught Jianshin's attention was one side of the medallion. It was engraved with 3 powerful words, Moon God Hall. Moon God Hall. Jianshin murmured. The fairy Haoyue in snow-white clothes suddenly appeared in his mind. Fairy Haoyue had left the cloud plain many years ago. She had gone to the Moon God Hall on the ice pole plain. There had been no news of her even now, so no one knew how she was doing right now. For a moment, Jianshin's mind seemed to wander as he stared at the 3 simple words on the medallion. He became lost in thought. He played around with the medallion in his hand, and he accidentally saw the back of the medallion. The words Nan Patian were engraved on the back of the medallion. Nan Patian! Jianshin's heart suddenly shuddered when he saw this name. His eyes shone brightly. He had heard this name from Fairy Haoyue more than once. This person was the Fairy Haoyue's greatest enemy. Even the reincarnation of Fairy Haoyue's soul to the Tianyuan continent was all thanks to Nan Patian. Now that Nan Potion's name had actually appeared on the back of the medallion, how could Jianshin not understand what it meant? It meant that Nan Patian was the person in charge of the Moon God Hall. Chapter 2481. Back on the cloud plain, Fairy Haoyue had become extraordinarily powerful after recovering her cultivation. She had slaughtered her way into the heavenly demon religion on the cloud plain all by herself, causing the 3 vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion to fail to do anything to her. In the end, she even destroyed the headquarters of the heavenly demon religion and left. Now that so many years had passed, Fairy Haoyue had probably become a chaotic prime already. Nan Patian of the Moon God Hall was already a peak chaotic prime many years ago. I wonder if he has broken through to Grand Prime or not. However, even if Nan Patian hasn't broken through, Fairy Haoyue won't be his opponent. I hope Fairy Haoyue is fine, Jianshin thought. He was rather worried about Fairy Haoyue's safety. However, he also understood that he was like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river right now. He was powerless to even protect himself. He was currently being hunted down by a mysterious expert of unknown origins. So how could he help Fairy Haoyue? I can only go to the Shenzhou Plain as soon as possible. As long as I personally return the Inata Tower to the heavenly palace of Bixing, not only will I be able to exchange for a large amount of cultivation resources for my sister, but I'll also be able to help Fairy Haoyue. With the heavenly palace of Bixing's strength, dealing with the matters of the Moon God Hall is probably just a matter of saying a single word. Jianshin felt eager. He was tempted to reach the heavenly palace of Bixing sooner. At this moment, Jianshin's hand lit up and a simple talisman appeared in his hand. This is a cosmic movement talisman. Jianshin's eyes lit up when he saw the talisman. In the past, he had obtained a space ring from a Grand Prime in the Azure Poseidon Palace. He had found several cosmic movement talismans in the space ring. The cosmic movement talismans were of extremely high quality. They could move extremely far away. Once they were activated, they could even successfully flee from regular Grand Primes. Now, Jianshin had actually found a talisman that was almost identical to the universal movement talisman in this space ring that he suspected belonged to someone from the Moon God Hall. This immediately made Jianshin overjoyed. The mysterious expert chasing behind him had a mysterious secret method that could accurately locate his position in the vast sea of stars. No matter how hard he tried, he could not shake him off. The appearance of such a universal shifting talisman could really provide him with timely help. No, this universal movement talisman is of a very low grade. It can't be compared to the few talismans I obtained in the Azure Poseidon Palace. But soon, Jianshin sighed in disappointment. The universal movement talisman was of a low grade. Ignoring the fact that it could not move him too far away, it was extremely likely that it would be disturbed by external forces when it was activated, which would lead to failure. As a result, the Universal Movement Talisman might be able to escape from some chaotic primes, but it would be very difficult to escape from peak experts like Grand Primes. Jianqin, he's almost here. At this moment, Kea warned him. With that, Jianqin stowed the Universal Movement Talisman away. He ripped open space again and returned to the Saint's world. As the chase continued, half a year passed very quickly. During that time, Jianqin moved between the Saint's world and spatial cracks time and time again to avoid the Elder of Mountains and Sea's pursuit. He maintained a certain distance from the Elder of Mountains and Seas the entire time, avoiding the range of the senses of his soul. During that time, the Elder of Mountains and Seas used a secret technique to increase his speed several times in an attempt to lock onto Jianqin with the senses of his soul. Unfortunately, Jianqin had Kea by his side. Kea's senses were unimaginably powerful, allowing him to accurately sense the Elder of Mountains and Seas' location. He would always warn Jianqin to avoid the Elder of Mountains and Seas before the Elder of Mountains and Seas arrived, which made the Elder of Mountains and Seas extremely resentful. Jianqin, even if you flee to the ends of the world, you won't be able to escape from the old man. The Elder of Mountains and Seas roared furiously. The Elder of Mountains and Seas roared out furiously from behind. He had gradually lost his patience after half a year of pursuit. His temper had become irritable. The longer this went on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Once other experts received the news, he would have probably worked for nothing. We'll arrive on the star brilliance plane in 2 days. In the vast cosmos, a small spaceship cut through the darkness of space as it sped along. Jianqin looked at the star map in the spatial battleship and finally let out a sigh of relief. Once he arrived on the star brilliance plane, he would be able to leave through teleportation formations. At that time, even Grand Primes would not be able to catch up to him. This was because crossing between planes through teleportation formations would definitely be faster than most Grand Primes. Jianqin felt extremely lucky along the way because the location of the spatial cracks that returned to the Saint's world was not fixed. Deviations were common, and it was even possible for them to directly appear in forbidden grounds of space. These forbidden grounds of space were either forbidden zones for life or places where astral beasts resided. Many Grand Primes dared not venture too deep into them. However, he did not deviate too much from the spatial cracks of the Saint's world countless times. He remained around the star brilliance plane the entire time. As a result, he actually arrived on the star brilliance plane a few years earlier than the spatial battleship from the Jade Fluid plane, even though he was much slower. "The star brilliance plane is up ahead," said Jianqin. He felt like a burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He could clearly see the tremendous continent that was the star brilliance plane now. However, because it was just too far away, the star brilliance plane was only the size of a fingernail in Jianqin's eyes. It was like a speck of dust, floating silently in outer space without moving at all. The heavenly king of azure brilliance could cross this distance in an instant, but Jianqin still needed 2 days. Kea, who stood beside Jianqin, did not show any joy at all when she saw the star brilliance plane appear up ahead. Instead, she seemed to have a lot on her mind, because in this half a year there had always been an extremely strong sense of danger enveloping her. The danger was so strong that it felt like the might of the heavens, and there was no way to avoid it. The only thing she could do was to wait for the arrival of this life and death crisis, and then endure it. At this moment, Kea suddenly looked at Jianqin. The light in her eyes flickered as she hesitated. It was as if she had something to say to Jianqin, but she found it rather difficult to say it. "Kea, what's wrong?" Jianqin was already an infinite prime now. His senses were astonishing. Even though he focused all of his attention on the star brilliance plane, he could still sense that something was wrong with Kea. Kea turned her head and looked at the star brilliance plain up ahead as if she was avoiding Jianchen's gaze. After a moment of silence, she seemed to have finally mustered up her courage and said gently, "Jianchen, there's something I've always wanted to ask you, but I've never dared to ask. Originally, I planned on burying it in the depths of my heart and not letting anyone know. But now I have a strong feeling that if I don't ask you now, I probably won't have the chance in the future." Jianchen was surprised when he heard that. He glanced at Kea deeply and sank into a long period of silence. He was not stupid. From Kea's words and expression, how could he not understand what Kea was referring to? Kea had clearly developed feelings for him. Jianchen was troubled by this. For a moment, he had no idea how to deal with it. Kea was born in the sea realm of a lower world. Jianchen could still clearly remember how he and newbies had met Kea in the sea realm for the first time in order to avoid the various experts of the beast god continent. Back then, Kea was the daughter of the patriarch of a tribe in the sea realm. Because of a crystal coin, they had become connected by fate, which led to all of their experiences afterwards. Afterwards, he obtained the cultivation method of the Emperor of the Eight Wastelands, so he passed it on to Kea. However, he had never expected it to lead to the destruction of Kea's tribe. The entire tribe was wiped out, and Kea had only survived by fleeing into the danger zone of the sea realm. Many years later, when Kea emerged from the danger zone, not only had her strength increased drastically, but she had also subdued a true divine beast, the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast. From then on, she stood at the apex of the Tianyuan continent. Afterwards, Kea's soul was heavily injured in the war against the world of Forsaken Saints, and she remained unconscious the entire time. In order to save Kea, he had taken Kea to the Saints' world and spent a lot of effort to awaken Kea. Jianchen had to admit that he had spent a lot of effort to awaken Kea. He had even risked his life to go to the Een Mountains of Seven's Despair on the southern region of the Cloud Plain in search of heavenly resources that could heal the soul. Although he had done a lot for Kea, he had only treated Kea as his best friend. He had no romantic feelings for her at all. Chapter 2482. Kea, you've known me for quite some time. You should understand me. Jianchen slowly spoke after a moment of silence. His voice was filled with deep powerlessness. Some things could not be stopped at all, such as Kea's feelings for him. Jianchen had no way of extinguishing them. Even now, he had no idea what to do. He had always treated Kea as his best friend, even back on the Tianyuan continent. In particular, when he and Kea were forced to flee the Cloud Plain from Huai An's pursuit, the hardships they had gone through along the way had established a deep friendship between them. Of course, this was only friendship. However, it was exactly because of this friendship that he was unwilling to harm Kea in any way. However, he truly felt powerless when faced with Kea's feelings for him. Kea was dejected. She did not look at Jianchen. Instead, she stared at the pitch-black outer space with gloomy eyes. "Jianchen, do you think I'm not pretty enough?" Kea gently asked as she revealed her true feelings. She had spoken the words that she had buried at the bottom of her heart for many years, causing the feelings that she had suppressed for many years to erupt like a volcano that had been suppressed for countless years. At that moment, she seemed to have become fearless. She no longer felt bashful as a woman. She had become brave. Jianchen gently sighed. Kea's sudden change had caught him off guard. Caught unprepared, he had no idea how to deal with it. Even though Kea's appearance could not be described as alluring, she was still rather pretty. She was not as bad as he had imagined her to be. Of course, at Jianchen's level of cultivation, he had seen through the essence of things long ago. He was no longer obsessed with appearances. No matter how pretty a person was, they were only pretty on the outside. Without their appearance, they were just a pile of skeletons. As a result, at Jianchen's level of cultivation, he had already broken free from the worldview of ordinary people. There was no difference between beauty and ugliness. Kea, on the other hand, was still obsessed with appearances despite being a divine king. She valued her body. This made Jianqin realize just how deep Keia's feelings for him were. This was because her feelings had blinded her, making her lose herself and unable to see through the essence of things. Jianqin, do you know that when I was heavily injured on the Tianyuan continent back then, my soul was damaged, causing me to fall unconscious for a very long time? You might have thought that I had lost all contact with the outside world after I fell unconscious, so I wouldn't know everything that had happened. Keia turned her head and looked at Jianqin. Mixed feelings filled her face as she continued, but in reality, it's the exact opposite. I know everything you did for me while I was unconscious. I even know that you went to the Yin Mountains of Seven's Despair and encountered the 9 Divine King in the depths. You only managed to bring back a heavenly resource that could heal the soul, the halcyon heart flower, after a close shave with you. As for me, it was because of the white jade spirit platform flower that I woke up from my coma. Keia spoke very softly. Her gaze towards Jianqin was filled with a gentleness that had never appeared in her eyes before. Now that the final barrier in her heart had been pierced, she revealed her true feelings. She no longer hid them in the depths of her heart like before. Jianqin was shocked when he heard Keia mention what happened in the Yin Mountains of Seven's Despair. After all, Keia back then was not even at the Origin Realm and was unconscious. Yet she still knew about what happened in the Yin Mountains of Seven's Despair. This made him feel extremely uneasy. Although Keia had displayed various extraordinary or even shocking abilities in the past few years, allowing Jianqin to guess that it was extremely likely that she was the reincarnation of an expert, it was impossible for her to know so many secrets at the level of a holy emperor. This was because Fairy Haoyue was also the reincarnation of a primordial realm expert from the Saint's world. However, even if Fairy Haoyue was at the level of a holy emperor, it was impossible for her to possess such heaven-defying abilities like Keia's. Is Keia the reincarnation of a peak Grand Prime? Jianqin thought. However, he was puzzled at the same time. Since she was reincarnated, why did Keia not show any signs of regaining her memories despite reaching the level of the Divine King? This was clearly different from the Fairy Haoyue he had met and the founders of the 10 protector clans on the Tianyuan continent. Fairy Haoyue had reincarnated with all her memories, while the founders of the 10 protector clans had reincarnated as well. Among them, Feng, Xiaotian, Guihai Yidao, and Yang Lai had all regained their memories when they were at the level of the Holy Emperor. Jianqin was filled with doubts, while Keia was brooding by herself. She was gloomy and she was in low spirits. She said gently, "It was also from that moment onwards that your figure gradually imprinted itself into my heart, and it grew deeper and deeper. In fact, I can feel that you only have ordinary feelings of friendship for me, and there is no romantic feelings at all. Therefore, I can only bury the feelings I have for you in the deepest part of my heart, making it a secret that only I know. Originally, I planned on hiding this secret for my entire life and never telling you. I just needed to be by your side and be able to see you from time to time. That would be enough. But now, I suddenly don't want to hide it anymore. I want you to know because I have a strong feeling that if I don't tell you now, I probably won't have another chance in the future." Keia's eyes gradually became moist when she reached there. Tears gathered and condensed into 2 crystalline teardrops in the end, slowly flowing down her cheeks. There was one thing she did not explain to Jianqin, which was that she still had a strong feeling that she did not have much time left with Jianqin. It was as if she would part with Jianqin soon. That parting might be permanent. Jianqin naturally did not understand what Keia meant when she said that they would not have another chance in the future. It was a permanent parting. He fell into a long period of silence after hearing what Keia had to say. Only after quite a while did he gently sigh. "Keia, we can only be normal friends." Keia's heart gently trembled. She said nothing more. Instead, she stared at the vast space gloomily as she seemed rather miserable. She already knew that this would be the outcome. They remained silent for the rest of the journey. Jianchen's small spaceship fell into silence. Both he and Kea remained silent. Before long, they arrived on the star brilliance plane. As spaceships could only travel through outer space, the two of them stowed the spaceship away when they arrived on the star brilliance plane. Afterwards, without any hesitation, they immediately flew towards the nearest city. Very soon, Jianchen and Kea arrived in a bustling city. They immediately spent a large amount of money to investigate the location of the nearest teleportation formation that could cross planes. Before long, Jianchen gained an even more detailed understanding of the star brilliance plane. It was even more detailed than what he had learned from sword equality. The star brilliance plane was where the 9 brilliance star Lord cultivated. As a result, no one dared to establish an empire on the star brilliance plane to show their respect to the 9 brilliance star Lord. No one dared to proclaim themselves as emperor. All the organizations of various sizes were scattered across the star brilliance plane in the form of clans and sections. The overall strength of the star brilliance plane ranked towards the top of the 49 great planes of the Saints' world. It could be said that it was only second to the 7 sacred planes. As a result, there were over 100 teleportation formations on the star brilliance plane. They were controlled by several dozen peak clans and sections. Jianchen also learned that the city he was currently in was actually controlled by a sect that only possessed infinite primes. A sect like that could only be regarded as below average on the star brilliance plane. So it was naturally impossible for them to possess a teleportation formation that could cross planes. After asking around, Jianchen finally learned that the nearest teleportation formation was within the territory of a peak sect called the 5-Point Sect. Afterwards, he and Kea immediately traveled to the territory of the 5-Point Sect through the teleportation formation. Just as Jianchen and Kea made their way to the 5-Point Sect, the space extremely far away from the star brilliance plane distorted violently. A huge crack suddenly appeared, and the Elder of Mountains and Seas appeared there like a ghost. As soon as he appeared, he immediately closed his eyes and used his innate ability to sense his surroundings. When he opened his eyes, they were cold. "I found you. That direction seems to be the star brilliance plane." "Humph. Don't even think about using the teleportation formation on the star brilliance plane to flee." The Elder of Mountains and Seas became worried. He did not dare to hesitate at all. With a single movement, he vanished, hurrying towards the star brilliance plane as quickly as he could. Chapter 2483. Jianchen and Kea were already standing on the teleportation formation in the bustling city on the star brilliance plane. The teleportation formation slowly activated and shone with bright white light. It was about to teleport them to the territory of the 5-Point Sect. However, at this moment, Jianchen shivered inside. The intense sense of danger appeared in his heart once again. He's already found my location. It won't be long before that mysterious expert arrives on the star brilliance plane. We need to move quickly. We need to enter the teleportation formation before he arrives, Jianchen said with a frown. With that, the teleportation formation shone brightly. Under the powerful power of teleportation, he and Kea vanished. The 5-Point Sect was one of the several dozen peak organizations on the star brilliance plane. Moreover, it was one of the more powerful ones. It ranked 9th on the star brilliance plane. Even though they were only ranked 9th, the star brilliance prefecture was, after all, in existence second only to the 7 great sacred prefectures. There are thousands of sects in the star brilliance prefecture, and there were as many experts as the clouds. For the 5-Point Sect to be able to stand out among them and be ranked at the top was enough to show the strength of the 5-Point Sect. Among them, the ancestor of the 5-Point Sect, the Point Cloud Venerable, was a dazzling figure whose name had spread across the entire Saints' world. This was because the Point Cloud Venerable controlled the laws of time and space. The two laws complemented each other and possessed astonishing power, allowing the Point Cloud Venerable to possess supreme battle prowess. He was known to be invincible among his peers. The 5-point sect controlled 3 teleportation formations that could cross planes. One of them was set up within the sect for the use of the disciples. The other 2 were set up in the 2 capital cities under the jurisdiction of the 5-point sect. Among the many cities under the jurisdiction of the 5-point sect, Fiery Light City was one of the only 2 super main cities. The central square of Firebright City was bustling with activity. Many cultivators moved about endlessly. The several dozen teleportation formations there constantly flickered as they transported people to and from the plane. At this moment, one of the teleportation formations flashed, and Jianchen and Kea appeared in Firebright City. As soon as they arrived at Firelight City, Jianchen and Kea headed straight for the teleportation array set up not far away. The intercontinental teleportation array was unusually quiet. Usually, no one would use it for 10 days to half a month. It was a stark contrast to the dozens of busy teleportation arrays beside it. The person guarding the teleportation formation was a middle-aged man in the robes of the 5-point sect. He was a first heavenly layer infinite prime. To any faction, a transcontinent teleportation array was a huge asset that could not be ignored. As a result, not only were teleportation formations protected by powerful formations, but the people guarding them were also primordial realm experts. Jianchen gave off a faint presence, disguising himself as a third heavenly layer infinite prime as he negotiated with the infinite prime guarding the place. I want to teleport to Shenzhou. The Star Brilliance plane is too far away from the same plane, so I can't teleport you there directly. I can only send you to the Hemophagus plane, said the primordial realm expert who watched over the teleportation formation. Then I'll go to the Hemophagus plane, said Jianchen. He seemed calm on the surface, but he was rather worried inside. The sense of danger grew stronger and stronger. The mysterious expert who had pursued him was rapidly approaching. He needed to leave as soon as possible. The infinite prime from the Huatian sect looked at Jianchen and Kea and said indifferently, 55 color divine crystals per person for going to the Hemophagus plane, so it'll be 100 for 2 people. Moreover, you are not allowed to take any other living beings with you through spatial god artifacts. Otherwise, once the formation detects you, you will be responsible for the consequences. Jianchen nodded. 55 colored divine crystals per person was quite a fair price. It was much cheaper than the interplanar teleportation formation he had used to leave the desolate plane. He immediately paid 100 5-colored divine crystals and passed through the formation's inspection with Kea. They stepped onto the interplanar teleportation formation. Although he still had spatial god artifacts on him, and Heya and Qing Yishuan were both in there, they were all in the Inata Tower. With the Inata Tower's quality, it was naturally impossible for the formation to detect them. At the same time, the Elder of Mountains and Seas rapidly approached the Star Brilliance plane with terrifying speed. The Star Brilliance plane grew larger and larger in his eyes. He was over 100 times faster than Jianchen. As he got closer, his senses for Jianchen's location became more and more accurate. Jianchen is actually within the territory of the 5-point sect. The 5-point sect has 3 interplanar teleportation formations. His current location, the Elder of Mountains and Seas, rapidly flew through space as he sensed again through a secret technique. Suddenly his face changed and he cried out, "Oh no, he seems to be in Firelight City right now." Firelight City just happens to have an interplanar teleportation formation. The Elder of Mountains and Seas' expression became extremely ugly. It would take him some time to reach the Star Brilliance plane. If Jianchen really was near an interplanar teleportation formation, Jianchen would have already left through the formation before he could even set foot on the Star Brilliance plane. Once he was teleported to the Star Brilliance plane, it would be impossible for him to catch up to Jianchen and obtain the Inata Tower from Jianchen. This was because he had already guessed that Jianchen would teleport continuously. He would definitely reach the Saint Plane before him. It was impossible to stop him. If Jianqin returned the Anita Tower to the heavenly palace of Bixing first, it would be pointless even if he captured Jianqin. I have to stop him! The elder of mountains and seas clenched his teeth. The light in his eyes flickered. The Point Cloud Venerable of the 5-Point Sect has some ties with me. It looks like I can only send a message to the Point Cloud Venerable. Making up his mind, the elder of mountains and seas immediately took out a communication jade talisman. Within a forbidden ground of the 5-Point Sect in the Star Brilliance Plain, an old man in white robes sat cross-legged in the air within a mountain range shrouded in clouds and mist. Not a single bit of aura leaked out from his body, causing him to look just like an ordinary person. However, the space around the old man seemed to be a living heart beating rhythmically. As the space pulsed, even the time in the region seemed to be affected, causing the flow of time to become extremely abnormal. It would slow down at times and speed up at times. As a matter of fact, the strange sight of time flowing backwards happened in an unbelievable manner. The laws of space and the laws of time had fused together. The old man was the supreme existence of the 5-Point Sect, the Point Cloud Venerable. At this moment, a communication jade talisman appeared in the Point Cloud Venerable's hand. He looked at it and murmured, "It's the elder of mountains and seas from the Gloomwater Sect on the Aqua Plane. Why has he suddenly sought out, old man?" The senses of the Point Cloud Venerable's soul immediately permeated the talisman. He communicated with the elder of mountains and seas from afar. "Point Cloud Venerable, seal off the 3 interplanar teleportation formations of your 5-Point Sect until the old man sets foot on the Star Brilliance Plane. The old man is willing to pay you with 2 bottles of hell water," the elder of mountains and seas said. 2 droplets of hell water," the Point Cloud Venerable called out. His eyes immediately lit up. Hell water was a specialty of the Aqua Plane. It was condensed from the limited amount of hell spring water on the Aqua Plane. It was divine liquid used to condense the soul and cleanse the impurities in the soul. Even to grand primes, it possessed great effects and was extremely precious. A single droplet of hell water would take 1,000,000 years to condense. It was extremely rare, so it had always been a priceless treasure in the saints' world. The elder of mountains and seas had offered up 2 droplets of hell water in one go, but it was only enough to seal off the teleportation formations of the 5-Point Sect for a short period of time. The Point Cloud Venerable almost believed that the elder of mountains and seas had gone senile. "All right, 2 droplets of hell water. That's what you said." The Point Cloud Venerable agreed without any hesitation, as if he was afraid that the elder of mountains and seas would return. Jianqin and Kea stood in the center of the teleportation formation in Firelight City. The teleportation formation had already been activated, and white light rose up. It grew brighter and brighter, gradually enveloping Jianqin and Kea. The teleportation formation was already being prepared. Very soon, Jianqin and Kea would be teleported away from the Star Brilliance Plane to the Hematophagus Plane. However, at this moment, the mind of the infinite prime of the 5-Point Sect, who stood guard near the teleportation formation, shuddered. A powerful presence of the senses of the soul crossed through space. The arrival of this divine sense immediately caused the middle-aged man guarding the teleportation array to reveal a respectful expression. After a few seconds, a gleam of light flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. He suddenly looked at Jianqin and Kea, who were about to be teleported away. He immediately formed a seal with both hands and sent a strand of energy into the teleportation formation. Chapter 2484. Jianqin finally let out a sigh of relief when he sensed the power of teleportation grow stronger in the surroundings. He had used teleportation formations across planes before. Although the formation needed some time to gather energy, he would definitely be able to teleport away before the mysterious expert arrived on the Star Brilliance Plane. As long as he arrived on the Bloodlust Plane, He would immediately use the teleportation formation to teleport a second time until he arrived on the Prosper Plane. As long as he continued to teleport, it would be impossible for the mysterious expert to catch up to him even if he was a Grand Prime. At this moment, the bright, white light from the teleportation formation suddenly dimmed. Even the surging power of teleportation rapidly diminished. Very soon, the teleportation formation that was about to complete its charging and perform a super long-distance teleportation completely stopped. What's going on? Why has the teleportation formation stopped? Jianchen suddenly looked at the Infinite Prime who watched over the teleportation formation, and his face sank. We've just received orders to temporarily close the teleportation formation. No one is allowed to leave through the teleportation formation of our 5-point sect, the middle-aged man said helplessly. He looked at Jianchen and Kai in doubt as well. He thought to himself, that's strange. Why would the ancestor suddenly order for the teleportation formation to be shut down? It's extremely rare to see a teleportation formation that can cross planes being shut down. Is it related to the two of them? Jianchen's heart sank. He had already guessed that it was related to the mysterious expert. He said nothing, pulling Kea with him as he flew towards the several dozen teleportation formations that could only be used on the Star Brilliance plane. There are several dozen teleportation formations across the Star Brilliance plane. Since we can't use the 5-point sect's teleportation formation, let's go somewhere else. I refuse to believe that he can shut down all the teleportation formations across the Star Brilliance plane, Jianchen said coldly. Immediately, he stepped onto a nearby teleportation formation with Kea, leaving the territory of the 5-point sect. Within the 5-point sect, the 5-point sect's ancestor, the Point Cloud Reverend, sat cross-legged in the air within the forbidden grounds. Although he had not taken a single step out of the forbidden grounds, if he wanted to know, even the slightest movement in the entire Star Brilliance continent would not be able to escape his senses. This was because the senses of his soul were so powerful that they could envelop the entire Star Brilliance plane. It looks like the Elder of Mountains and Seas is pursuing those two people. Who are they? They're just a mere infinite prime and a divine king. Yet the Elder of Mountains and Seas is willing to pay such a great price to keep them on the Star Brilliance plane. Thought. The Elder of Mountains and Seas had used 2 droplets of Hell's spring water to stop 2 insignificant figures who were nothing in his eyes. This piqued his interest. Hell water was extremely effective even to Grand Primes, so its value was obvious. However, the Elder of Mountains and Seas had actually used it on 2 insignificant figures. This was not his style. I heard that the Elder of Mountains and Seas visited the desolate plain recently in an attempt to obtain the Inata Tower from Jianchen. Is one of them Jianchen in disguise? The Point Cloud Venerable's eyes lit up. He immediately stood up, and a terrifying presence radiated from him, causing the mountains and rivers to tremble and space to distort. The disturbance caused by the Inata Tower had already spread across the Saints' world. Naturally, the Point Cloud Venerable knew about it as well. However, due to the fact that there were just too many experts gathered on the desolate plain, the Point Cloud Venerable knew that his chances of obtaining the Inata Tower were very slim. He would also offend many organizations, so he did not take part. However, it was extremely likely for Jianchen to appear in the territory of the 5-point sect with the Inata Tower. Apart from the Elder of Mountains and Seas, no one else knew about this. Even if he obtained the Inata Tower, he would not have to worry about many experts fighting over it. This immediately tempted the Point Cloud Venerable. Ha ha ha, it's a heaven-sent opportunity. It's a heaven-sent opportunity. If other people want the Inata Tower, they just have to return the Inata Tower to the heavenly palace of Bishing and then benefit from it. However, with the old man's methods, if he plans properly and doesn't let anyone else know about this, he might be able to take the Inata Tower for himself. The Point Cloud Venerable laughed aloud. The laws of space and the laws of time revolved around him. He had already begun using his great abilities to obscure the heavenly secrets. However, at this moment, the depths of his heart suddenly throbbed. An uneasy feeling silently appeared in his heart. The Point Cloud Venerable was surprised. After a moment of thought, he fused with the surroundings. The laws of space and the laws of time complemented each other, forming a river of time beneath his feet. His eyes flickered with the light of divination as he radiated with the dense presence of the ways. He stepped on the river of time and went against the flow, peering into the future. Gradually, the excitement on the Point Cloud Venerable's face vanished, and he became stern. Very soon, the river of time vanished, and the presence of the ways around the Point Cloud Venerable vanished as well. He hovered in the air as he stared into the distance. His eyes were stern and filled with surprise. I never thought that the Inata Tower would actually be a huge matter of karma. It's a calamity that cannot be tainted. Although I failed to see the source of the karma, unable to see the origin of the calamity, I saw the destruction of the 5-point sect. I saw my own death. If I were to interfere with the Inata Tower, I might be able to obtain it, but I would definitely die in the end. The Point Cloud Venerable struggled to remain composed. His face became rather pale. He possessed a wondrous ability after fusing the laws of space and the laws of time. He could see through fate and the future. He had survived many calamities with this ability. As a result, he firmly believed in what he had just seen in the river of time. The Point Cloud Venerable slowly calmed down. He sat down in the air again and no longer interfered. On the other side, Jianshan and Kea had already left the territory of the Huayan sect through a teleportation formation. They arrived in the second city with a teleportation formation. After paying the 5-colored divine crystals, they began the teleportation as quickly as possible. The sense of danger within him grew stronger and stronger. He knew that he did not have much time left. However, at this moment, the powerful senses of the soul extended over from outer space, directly enveloping the city Jianshan resided in. Jianshan, who stood in the teleportation formation, could clearly sense the suffocatingly powerful senses of the soul break through the dense power of the teleportation formation and envelop him. The senses of the soul were so powerful that they directly interfered with the operation of the teleportation formation. Immediately, the power around the teleportation formation began to pulse unstably. The formation was obstructed. Oh no! Jianshan's face changed. The senses of the soul had arrived much faster than he had imagined. P.S. Originally, I wanted to speed up the updating of Old Enemy from today onwards. I don't want to say how much, but at the very least, there should be at least 2 updates. But when I was writing today, I suddenly had a headache, so I could only grit my teeth and persevere until I finished writing this chapter. Chapter 2485. SSS. In the next moment, there was the sound of space being ripped open. A shriveled, old hand extended out from there, directly reaching towards the teleportation formation. The palm contained an unbelievable amount of power, and the laws of the Great Path condensed within it. Before the palm, the thick layer of teleportation power was as weak as tofu, unable to stop it at all. Stop! This is the teleportation formation of our Rakshasa sect. Senior, aren't you afraid of angering the Rakshasa ancestor by destroying our teleportation formation without regard for the rules? A primordial realm expert from the Rakshasa sect who stood guard beside the teleportation formation called out. As the teleportation formation was in operation, the protective formations had been completely shut down. Right now, the teleportation formation was completely defenseless. Not only was the hand destroying the stability of the teleportation formation, but it could even cause irreparable damage to the structure and formations of the teleportation formation. After all, this was a teleportation formation that could cross planes. It was no ordinary teleportation formation. Every single one of them required tremendous resources and resources. Even peak organizations could not possess too many of them. Once they were destroyed, they would be extremely difficult to repair. I, the elder of mountains and seas, will repay your Rakshasa sect's losses double. The Elder of Mountains and Sea's ancient voice rang out. He stepped out of outer space, and blue light surged into the air around him, turning into an ocean that enveloped the entire city. The power of ways interwove in the surroundings, obscuring the horizon and obscuring everything. Afterwards, he suddenly pulled with his hand. Jianqin and Kea, who stood in the teleportation formation, immediately felt the space around them become locked up by a mysterious power. As a result, the two of them were pulled out of the teleportation formation uncontrollably. During this time, both Jianqin and Kea were powerless to resist. After all, they faced a Grand Prime. The difference between them was just too great. Swish! With a flash, the Elder of Mountains and Seas had already left with Jianqin and Kea, vanishing without a trace. The primordial realm expert from the Rakshasa sect, who stood guard near the teleportation formation, immediately crushed a jade talisman. In the next moment, the powerful senses of the soul permeated over, lingering above the city. The Elder of Mountains and Seas. Vaguely, a voice that seemed to come from hell rang out. Afterwards, the powerful senses of the soul expanded, enveloping the entire star brilliance plane. The ancestor of the Rakshasa sect had already searched the entire star brilliance plane for the Elder of Mountains and Seas. The Elder of Mountains and Seas stood within an aqua-blue barrier in an extremely remote region of the star brilliance plane. He was excited, and his eyes filled with unconcealable joy. Jianqin and Kea were stern-faced with a Grand Prime. The old man's heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water can obscure the heavenly secrets and evade the senses of the soul of many Grand Primes. As a result, don't even think about other experts coming and using the chaos to flee. Jianqin, you fled under the old man's nose for so long. I'd like to see how you're going to escape this time. The Elder of Mountains and Seas sneered as if victory was already within his grasp. Indeed, now that he had trapped Jianqin in the heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water, there was no need for him to worry about Jianqin escaping. The heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water was equivalent to a miniature world. Unless the miniature world was destroyed, it was impossible for anyone to escape. However, with Jianqin's cultivation as an infinite prime, destroying the heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water that could block attacks from Grand Primes was nothing more than a pipe dream. Senior, you've chased us all this way just so you can obtain the Inata Tower. I can give you the Inata Tower, but you have to let the two of us go, Jianqin said sternly. The Elder of Mountains and Seas shook his head when he heard that. He smiled strangely. Jianqin, if you had realized this earlier, the old man might have spared the two of you, but it's already too late now. The Elder of Mountains and Seas' face was cold and filled with killing intent. He continued, you made the old man chase you through outer space for so long, and you even encountered a golden sword beast, injuring the old man slightly. You've already infuriated the old man. This time, even if you hand over the Inata Tower, the old man will never spare you. The old man knows you have some connections with the God Clan. If the God Clan was at its peak, the old man would still fear it slightly, but the God Clan is no longer the same as before. As long as you die, the Hall Elders and Great Elders of the God Clan will never make such a big fuss for a mere person like you. Do you really want to kill us all? Jianqin's face sank. A smear of determination appeared in his eyes as he secretly communicated with the sword spirits. He had run out of options now. The only thing he could do to deal with the crisis before him was fusing the twin swords. Although this would expose his identity, he had no other choice. The Elder of Mountains and Seas said nothing. Killing intent shone in his eyes. He stopped wasting time with Jianqin and directly attacked. His hand paused, and the power of ways surged. Water blue light blotted out the sky, turning into a huge wave that swept towards Jianqin and Kea. Jianqin acted like he was facing a great enemy. He became extremely stern. The twin swords were about to fuse. He did not hide in the Inata Tower. Although the Elder of Mountains and Seas could not get through the Inata Tower, he could leave with the Inata Tower. Once he ended up in the Elder of Mountains and Seas' hands, the Elder of Mountains and Seas only needed to refine the Inata Tower slightly with his abilities as a Grand Prime. Boom! However, at this moment, a deafening rumble suddenly rang out. The heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water, cast down by the Elder of Mountains and Seas, shook violently. A crack gradually appeared on the barrier that could block attacks from Grand Primes. Point Cloud Venerable, don't ruin the old man's plans. Once the old man obtains the Inata Tower, he'll give you half of the benefits, the Elder of Mountains and Seas roared. The Elder of Mountains and Seas roared out. His heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water was extremely well hidden. It could fool the senses of Grand Prime souls. On the entire Star Brilliance plane, aside from the Supreme Nine Brilliance Star Lord, only the Point Cloud Venerable, who possessed the laws of space and the laws of space, could find him through the mysteries of space and time. Chapter 2486. Immediately, the heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water shattered. Kea, take the Inata Tower and leave. Jianqin responded extremely quickly. He ripped through space with the 9-star sword of heavenly ways and shoved the fist-sized Inata Tower into Kea's hands. At the same time, he took out the cosmic movement talisman he had found on the primordial realm expert of the moon god Hull. He activated it without any hesitation and stuck it on Kea before pushing Kea into the spatial crack. His plan was very simple. He wanted Kea to take the Inata Tower away, and then he would activate the cosmic movement talisman in the spatial crack to take Kea to an unknown place. Kea had the Inata Tower, so there was no danger in the spatial crack. As for himself, he could only stay behind and fuse the Azulite swords to deal with the Elder of Mountains and Seas, or even kill him. As long as the Elder of Mountains and Seas was still alive, even if Kea left with the Inata Tower, the Elder of Mountains and Seas would find him sooner or later. However, at this moment, Kea actually forcefully flew out of the spatial crack. She smiled faintly as she seemed to have been freed. She said, slowly, Jianqin, if you want to leave, leave by yourself. I hope you can remember me often after I die, and not let me forget, Kea said gently as she gently pecked Jianqin's cheek. Humph, you're about to die, yet you're still in the mood to flirt. Do you think you still have a chance to escape before the old man? The Elder of Mountains and Seas snorted coldly. His terrifying presence crushed through space, causing it to freeze. Jianqin immediately felt like he was immobilized. However, Kea was unaffected. She could move freely in the frozen space. Afterwards, she used the laws of creation, destruction, and fire simultaneously to knock the immobilized Jianqin into the spatial crack. Kea! Jianqin, who was falling into the void cracks, cried out in alarm. His expression changed drastically. Kea stood on the Star Brilliance plane and looked at Jianqin with a smile. He was at ease, without the fear of facing death. Afterwards, she looked at the Elder of Mountains and Seas. She was indifferent. Immediately, a blue light enveloped Kea. The blue light was condensed from the Elder of Mountains and Seas' ways. It was the power of laws and possessed unbelievable power. Kea was enveloped by the blue light, and her body began to melt at a visible rate, reduced to dust. Nothing was left behind. Kea, no. Jianqin let out a roar of grief and indignation. His eyes instantly turned red, and he wanted to rush back with all his might. He watched helplessly as Kea died in front of him. His heart was filled with grief and indignation, and he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, at this moment, the cosmic movement talisman activated. A dense power of teleportation surged out, taking him away. The void cracks gradually closed up as well. You've fallen into the old man's hands, and you still want to escape? You're dreaming. The Elder of Mountains and Seas was furious. He had pursued Jianqin through outer space for so long and expended so much effort before finally capturing Jianqin after so much difficulty. How could he just watch Genshin escape? The Elder of Mountains and Seas extended a finger, and the power of ways condensed. A terrifying power ripped through space, about to pursue Genshin. He could tell with a single glance that Genshin's cosmic movement talisman was not of a particularly high grade. Even if he was teleported away, he would not be teleported too far away. At this moment, Kaeya's body rapidly melted away. Her flesh and blood had been reduced to dust under the Elder of Mountains and Seas attacks, dispersing into the surroundings bit by bit. It began with her legs, before spreading to her waist, and then to her upper body. In a single moment, Kaeya's entire body vanished. Only her head remained. At the same time, her head rapidly melted away as well. There was no fear in her eyes at all. There was only sorrow and a heavy reluctance to part. She knew she was about to die. She was not afraid of death, as she should have died in the lower world. She had only revived because of Genshin. Her sorrow and reluctance came from the fact that she knew she would never have the chance to accompany Genshin again. She would never be able to fight alongside Genshin again. At this moment, Kaeya's face suddenly stiffened. The light in her eyes suddenly vanished, as if she had forgotten her troubles, forgotten her worries, forgotten all her emotions and colors. In the next moment, a cold light appeared in Kaeya's eyes. She directly glanced at the Elder of Mountains and Seas. Under the cold gaze, the Elder of Mountains and Seas, who was about to rip open space to chase after Genshin, immediately shivered. A strange coldness filled his entire body. The Elder of Mountains and Seas subconsciously looked at Kaeya, who only had her head left. His gaze just happened to meet Kaeya's cold gaze. The Elder of Mountains and Seas' heart immediately shuddered with that glance. The gaze was like the might of the heavens, filled with endless awe. Just a single glance was enough to fill the Elder of Mountains and Seas' entire soul. It made his body cold, and his blood stopped flowing. A bone-chilling coldness rose up from his spine. What kind of gaze was that? It was cold and emotionless. It was like the eye of the heavens. Even a Grand Prime like the Elder of Mountains and Seas could not help but shiver inside from how it looked. An inexplicable sense of fear filled the Elder of Mountains and Seas' heart. Even though he was a Grand Prime, he was unable to break free from this shadow. Fortunately, the gaze only lasted for a split second before Kaeya's head completely vanished, dispersing into the surroundings as dust. Nothing was left behind. Her soul had been wiped out, and the gaze that made the Elder of Mountains and Seas feel fear vanished as well. The Elder of Mountains and Seas remained frozen there. He did not move, nor did he chase after Genshin. This was because he could not help but think about the terrifying gaze he had just seen. Although it had only been a split second, that split second had left an unerasable shadow in the Elder of Mountains and Seas' heart. Even now, he still felt cold, unable to recover from it. However, what the Elder of Mountains and Seas failed to notice was that after Kaeya's death, a streak of light that no one could discover remained. The streak of light was extremely well hidden. Even when the Elder of Mountains and Seas was so close to it, he failed to sense it at all. With a flash, the streak of light vanished. It flickered through outer space at an astonishing speed, crossing an entire plane or even several planes in a single flash. It was so fast that even many Grand Primes were dumbfounded. In just a few seconds, the streak of light had basically crossed a small portion of the Saint's world, crossing over a dozen planes and entering a majestic, golden divine hall. A figure stood in the depths of the divine hall. He shone with a hazy light, enveloped by the dense light of ways. He seemed to have fused with the world. At this moment, the streak of light that crossed over a dozen planes arrived before the figure with a flash. With another flash, it fused into the figure's forehead and vanished. The figure, enveloped by the light of the great path, suddenly trembled slightly. His tightly shut eyes slowly opened, revealing a pair of emotionless eyes. However, very soon, His eyes rippled as if they had gained some other colors. Vaguely, many scenes seemed to interweave, like a rock that had been tossed into a lake. It was no longer calm. However, this only lasted for a short while. After opening and closing his eyes, he recovered his previous iciness. "From now onwards, my fate with you ends," he murmured to himself. His voice was emotionless, and it was impossible to tell if he was a man or a woman. Afterwards, a jade-white hand extended out from the light of ways, extending into the space ahead. Chapter 2487. What was that gaze? Why was it so terrifying? The Elder of Mountains and Seas gradually recovered where Kea had died on the Star Brilliance plane. He stood there in fright. Before he knew it, he had become drenched in cold sweat. He had already forgotten about pursuing Jianchen. The gaze earlier had deeply shocked him. The great fear from the depths of his soul made him uneasy. He was a Grand Prime, an existence that stood at the apex. He struggled to imagine just what kind of powerful and terrifying existence could affect him so greatly with a single gaze. Probably even someone like the 9 Brilliant Star Lord, who's only second to Grand Exalts, can't intimidate me with a single gaze. Since it's not someone only second to Grand Exalts, is it? The Elder of Mountains and Seas' eyes narrowed. As soon as he thought of this possibility, he immediately felt his body turn cold. A bone-chilling coldness swept through him. It was also at this moment that many powerful senses of the soul spread over from various places on the Star Brilliance plane, lingering around the Elder of Mountains and Seas. The disturbance caused by a Grand Prime's battle was just too great. The Point Cloud Venerable had destroyed the Elder of Mountains and Seas' heaven-obscuring barrier of floating water, which had already attracted the attention of all the peak experts on the Star Brilliance plane. They all extended the senses of their souls to check on the situation. One of the senses of the soul was filled with intense malice. It said furiously, "Elder of Mountains and Seas, you've destroyed the teleportation formation of my Rakshasa sect. If you don't give me an explanation, I can only pay a visit to your territory." The owner of the senses of the soul was clearly the ancestor of the Rakshasa sect. He was also a Grand Prime, no weaker than the Elder of Mountains and Seas. However, at this moment, a mysterious and powerful power suddenly descended. With the arrival of the power, all the senses of the soul in the surroundings dispersed like the morning mist that had encountered the scorching sun. In an instant, all the senses of the soul in the surroundings vanished completely. A region of several 100 million kilometers around the Elder of Mountains and Seas had become a forbidden zone where the senses of the soul could not reach. A supreme power suppressed the senses of the souls and senses of all the Grand Primes, isolating the region. What's going on? This unforeseen event caused the top experts hiding in various places of the Star Brilliance Prefecture to be shocked. At that moment, everyone could not help but look in the direction of the Elder of Mountains and Seas. Their gazes were extremely deep, as if they contained the vastness of the cosmos, piercing through space and seeing billions of kilometers away. However, this time they only saw an expanse of chaos. Not only were they unable to see anything clearly, they were even unable to deduce the workings of the heavens. Within the forbidden grounds of the 5-Point sect, the Point Cloud Venerable suddenly stood up. He stared in the direction of the Elder of Mountains and Seas sternly as the light in his eyes flickered. "I knew something would happen, but I never thought it would come so quickly. This time the Elder of Mountains and Seas is probably..." The Elder of Mountains and Seas naturally sensed the abnormal changes in the surroundings where Kea had died. A sliver of unease appeared on his face, and he was just about to leave. However, at this moment, a hand with the power of ways silently extended out from outer space. It was hazy and blurry. It did not give off any pulses of energy, nor did it possess any startling might. The hand was like a ghost, appearing out of nowhere and pressing towards the Elder of Mountains and Seas silently. However, when the hand appeared, the laws of the world on the entire star brilliance plane seemed to be heavily disturbed, becoming abnormally disorderly. However, the disorder seemed to follow a certain pattern. It was not disorderly. Vaguely, it seemed like it was retreating, making way, submitting to the hand. The hand that had appeared out of nowhere seemed to replace the sky of the star brilliance plane, becoming the sovereign of the star brilliance plane, the uncrowned king. The 3,000 ways revolved around it, changing with it. Spare me, grand exalt. Spare me, grand exalt. The elder of mountains and seas became extremely frightened. He had taken part in the battle over 3 million years ago. He had personally witnessed the battle between grand exalts from very far away. Was the hand not from a grand exalt who had comprehended the laws to the limit from the extremely pure presence of the ways of the world? The elder of mountains and seas unleashed everything he had, using various secret techniques and everything he had to flee. However, the hand's arrival severed the laws of the world and altered the order of the space, rendering the laws that the elder of mountains and seas comprehended useless. Moreover, the presence of the ways suppressed him, immobilizing the elder of mountains and seas. In the previous moment, he was a majestic grand prime, an existence who stood at the apex of the pyramid. Now he was as puny as an ant. Bang! The hazy and obscure hand landed gently on the elder of mountains and seas' head under the circulation of the power of ways. Immediately, the elder of mountains and seas vanished. He had truly vanished, as if he had been vaporized. Not even a speck of dust remained. Everything on him had truly vanished from the world. In the blink of an eye, the elder of mountains and seas died. He did not even have the time to cry out. With the elder of mountains and seas' death, the hand vanished as well, as if it had never appeared. It did not leave behind any traces at all. The disrupted laws of the world on the star brilliance plane returned to normal. The mysterious power that suppressed the senses of the soul vanished. Immediately, powerful senses of the soul swept over again, rapidly moving through the space there. Afterwards, figures flickered. Many grand primes who had sensed the abnormality here all rushed over from various places. They hovered 1,000 kilometers in the air and looked down. Light flickered as they were surprised and doubtful. Where's the elder of mountains and seas? Why has he suddenly vanished? If the elder of mountains and seas had left, some of us would definitely have sensed him in such a short amount of time. However, none of us sensed him at all. What happened here earlier? Why have the senses of our souls been obstructed, and even the heavenly secrets have been obscured? The point cloud venerable of the 5-point sect arrived as well. He stared at the ground below, silently. Point cloud supremacy. You have grasped the laws of time and space. In terms of your understanding of space-time, you surpass all of us here. Please use your time reversal technique and let us know what happened here in the past, said one of the Almighties who had some connections with the point cloud supremacy. The point cloud venerable shook his head. All the order of space here has been disrupted. The power is just too powerful. I can't push it away, see through it, or turn back time. Old man is powerless. Suddenly, a powerful pressure permeated the surroundings. A man in azure robes silently appeared 10,000 meters in the air. His arrival caused the tens of thousands of stars in the sky to shine brightly. Vaguely, it was as if there was endless starlight shining down on his body. Chapter 2488. Greetings to the Star Lord! Greetings to the Star Lord! All the peak experts gathered there, clasped their fists, and bowed with the 9 brilliant star, Lord's arrival. All of them were filled with respect. The 9 brilliant star, Lord, was in existence only second to Grand Exalts. He had reached the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime many years ago, only a step away from Grand Exalt. He stood at the same level as the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, Vexin. The 9 brilliant star, Lord hovered in the air. He glanced around at first before settling on where the elder of mountains and seas had died. His eyes immediately deepened as the laws of the world wove together, divining. But in the next moment he frowned. The laws of the space had been rearranged, wiping away all traces and heavenly secrets. Even with his cultivation, he was unable to divine anything. Which expert has come to my star brilliance plane? From the changes in the laws of the world earlier, this person's cultivation is at the same level as mine at the very least. There are only so many people like me in the current Saint's world. Which one of them is it? The Nine Brilliance Star Lord's face became rather ugly. The star brilliance plane was his territory, yet a foreign peak expert had actually come to the star brilliance plane to kill. This was an extremely great provocation to his dignity. He did not forbid battles between Grand Primes, but if an expert at the same level as him came to the star brilliance plane to cause trouble, he needed to step in. At this moment, the sky of the star brilliance plane suddenly darkened. It was blood-red. A figure condensed from blood silently appeared before the Nine Brilliance Star Lord. Master! The Nine Brilliance Star Lord was shocked when he saw the blood-red figure. He immediately bowed politely. The blood-red figure was the Blood Tier Grand Exalt. Not only did the Nine Brilliance Star Lord become shocked by the arrival of a sovereign of the Saints' world, but even all the peak experts below paled in fright. They immediately bowed. Everyone was shocked. Had the Blood Tier Grand Exalt personally come to the Star Brilliance plane because of the small incident that had happened earlier? What did it mean to draw out a Grand Exalt? It meant that what had happened earlier was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Where did you all come from? Go back to where you came from. Blood Tier Tai Zun spoke, his voice full of energy, ordering everyone to withdraw. The Grand Exalt's every word and action was like the decree of the world. No one dared to disobey. In an instant, all the peak experts gathered their head left. Master, why are you here? The Nine Brilliant Star Lord asked politely behind the Blood Tier Grand Exalt after everyone had left. Anata's reincarnation has been killed in your territory, so I obviously have to come and take a look, said the Blood Tier Grand Exalt. He was surrounded by a dense, bloody mist, making it impossible to see him clearly. What, is he really reincarnated? The Nine Brilliance Star Lord gasped. Disbelief filled his face. Master, are you saying that the Anata Grand Exalt didn't die in the battle over 3 million years ago and instead reincarnated? The Blood Tier Grand Exalt nodded slowly. In the past, he also believed that the Anata Grand Prime had died and vanished from the world. However, ever since he saw Anata's reincarnation on the desolate plain, he learnt that the Anata Grand Exalt was not dead like the rumors said. The Nine Brilliant Star Lord became stern after receiving confirmation from the Blood Tier Grand Exalt. He had some understanding of reincarnation. Reincarnation was a huge risk to any expert. Even Grand Exalts were no exception. When Grand Exalts reincarnated, they would lose all their memories and cultivation, returning to their mortal form. They would have to cultivate step by step as a mortal, and before they reached a certain level of cultivation, they would not be able to awaken their past memories. Moreover, the path of cultivation was filled with tribulations. Even if Grand Exalts reincarnated were slain before they had matured and had their souls wiped out, they would truly vanish from the world. It was exactly because of this that the Nine Brilliant Star Lord felt troubled when he heard that the Anata Grand Exalt's reincarnation had been slain. In his opinion, the death of Anata's reincarnation was equivalent to the death of the Anata Grand Exalt. Perhaps because he could see the Nine Brilliant Star Lord's worry, the Blood Tier Grand Exalt continued, You don't have to worry too much. Anata's soul has already returned to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Her reincarnation only has a soul with the memories of her past life sealed away. As a result, the death of her reincarnation was actually intentional on Anata's part. Master, I really don't understand why the Anata Grand Exalt wanted her reincarnation to die, said the Nine Brilliant Star Lord. Anita's reincarnation is only a tool to assist Anita in comprehending the ways of the world. Her reincarnation has always been with a young man. She just wants her reincarnation to fall in love with the young man and form a fruit of ways so that she can comprehend her fifth way, the way of emotions. I've paid some attention to the young man as well. He's Genshin, the person who's been making a ruckus in the saints' world recently. He's the one who carries the Anita Tower everywhere with him, said the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt. What? The Anita Grand Exalt's reincarnation wants to comprehend the way of emotions through Genshin? The 9 Brilliant Star Lord was utterly stunned. Did that not mean that a sovereign of the saints' world would fall in love with a nobody in the saints' world? That was the greatest joke in the world. The Blood-Tear Grand Exalt continued. Since Anita has abandoned her reincarnation now, it looks like the fruit of ways she needs to comprehend her fifth way has matured. However, there's no need for her to sacrifice her reincarnation for the fruit of ways. So why did she abandon her reincarnation? Using her reincarnation to create a second clone will give her endless room for growth. It's even possible for her clone to become a Grand Exalt. Isn't that even better? Could it be that Huan has really been affected by the emotions of her reincarnation and wants to leave a deep impression on the young man called Genshin? The Blood-Tear Grand Exalt was puzzled by this as well. Grand Exalts were existences on the same level as him and even more powerful than him. He was unable to peer into the matter at all, so he could only guess. The 9 Brilliants Star Lord fell silent. The information he had obtained from the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt was just too shocking. He needed some time to digest it. At this moment, a space ring appeared in the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt's hand. He passed the space ring to the 9 Brilliant Star Lord and said, "This is a fruit of ways I found in the chaos. Take it to the heavenly palace of Bishing immediately and give it to Anita for me. In the past, I thought Anita was dead, so I collected a droplet of her essence blood and used it to nourish Gusta's body. I wanted to refine Gusta's body into a battle slave so that I could conquer the immortals' world in the future. In the end, Anita discovered this, which led to a karmic conflict between me and her. Now, I'll use this fruit of ways to resolve this karmic conflict." Chapter 2489. After the 9 Brilliant Star Lord's departure, the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt vanished as well. The Devour Plane was one of the 7 sacred planes of the saints' world. At the same time, it was where the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt cultivated. As the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt spent most of his time on the Devour Plane, cultivating there and comprehending the supreme ways, his senses of ways affected the laws of the world on the entire Devour Plane, making it much easier for cultivators to comprehend the mysteries of ways on the Devour Plane compared to other places. It became a paradise for cultivation, which was why it was renowned on the sacred plane. At this moment, the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt sat on a throne in a majestic, blood-red divine hall on the Devour Plane. He was enveloped by a faint, blood-red mist. The huge temple was empty. It was as if there was no other living being in it other than him. "Looks like Anita's cultivation is about to recover," the Blood-Tear Grand Exalt murmured from the throne. "Anita has already comprehended the laws of creation, destruction, fire, and space. She's reached the limit of 100 in the laws of creation, destruction, and fire. Even the laws of space have reached the 5th heavenly layer of Grand Prime. She was extremely powerful in the first place, ranking within the top 3 in the saints' world. Only that person from the warring gods can surpass her. Now, she's comprehended a 5th law, the way of emotions. Anita's strength is becoming more and more powerful. In the current saints' world, that person from the warring gods is already dead. The space-time elder who was on par with Anita died over 3 million years ago as well. Once Anita recovers to her peak condition, who will be her opponent in the saints' world? The Blood-Tear Grand Exalt felt pressured as well. Anita had comprehended 3 ways to the limit, and her fourth way, the laws of space, was not too far away from the limit either. However, he had only comprehended a single way to the limit right now, while Anita had already comprehended a fifth way. The difference between them was growing larger and larger. However, the fifth way she has comprehended is the way of emotions. Emotions are the most difficult to describe. It's a double-edged sword. Although it can allow Anita's strength to reach a new level, it'll also restrain her, or it might even lead to a disaster for her. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will also age. The Grand Exalt has already formed the Tao with his own body, becoming a part of the great Tao of the world. He represents the world. As a result, Grand Exalts shouldn't have feelings, or they'll be plagued by endless tribulations. From then on, not only will they be unable to make any more progress with their cultivation, they might even pass away as a result. Huanjin is playing with fire. With that, the blood-tear Grand Exalt seemed to realize something. His body suddenly shuddered, revealing a pair of blood-red eyes. His eyes were completely red, as if there was endless blood churning within. No one dared to look him in the eye. It was extremely terrifying. I understand now. After the fifth great Tao, there's a sixth great Tao. She'll first develop feelings for Jianqin through her reincarnation, and then pass this unforgettable feeling to her original body, allowing her to comprehend the way of emotions. When her feelings for Jianqin reach an extremely deep level, she'll personally take action and kill the person she loves the most. That way, she can comprehend the sixth great Tao. The sixth great Tao is the way of extinguishing emotions. She'll use Jianqin's death to forge her sixth great Tao, the way of extinguishing emotions. Only when she completes her sixth great Tao can she return to the path of emotionlessness. Anita's reincarnation is the fruit of her fifth great Tao, while Jianqin is the fruit of her sixth great Tao. No wonder she protects Jianqin. She's protecting her own fruit of ways. But that makes sense. Jianqin possesses the sword spirits, so he must be someone from the immortals' world. Anita was injured by the master of the twin swords in the past, so she's using the successor of the twin swords to forge her sixth great Tao. It's a form of revenge. A sixth great Tao. A sixth great Tao. I never thought that Anita would gain 2 more great Tao after this cycle of reincarnation. She'll become more and more terrifying. Maybe there'll be a day when even that person from the warring gods won't be able to keep her suppressed. In a certain region of the saints' world, many scattered meteors hovered in a dark region of space. At this moment, the white-robed Jianqin sat on the largest meteor. He sat there emotionlessly. He had already taken off the mask Mo Tianyan had given him. He no longer used the mask to hide his true appearance. Back when he was pushed into the spatial crack by Kea, he had been sent to an unknown place by the cosmic movement talisman. Even though he had ripped open space and escaped as quickly as he could, he was already far away from the star brilliance plane. He would not be able to make it back in a short amount of time. As a result, he found a meteor nearby and sat down. He constantly adjusted his condition so that he was at his peak condition at all times. He knew that even if he made it back to the star brilliance plane, it would be pointless. Kea was already dead. He watched helplessly as Kea's body disintegrated bit by bit. At this moment, not a single trace of Kea could be found in the entire saint's world. His heart ached, so much so that he wanted to die. He was overcome with grief. His entire head was filled with hatred. The hatred was so great that he had lost his rationality. He knew that the Elder of Mountains and Seas possessed an innate ability. No matter how far he fled, the Elder of Mountains and Seas would be able to accurately sense his location. As a result, he sat there quietly, waiting for the Elder of Mountains and Seas to arrive. Sword spirits, do you have the confidence to kill a Grand Prime if you fuse your swords with my current strength? Jianqin secretly contacted the sword spirits. It shouldn't be a problem for those below the 5th heavenly layer of Grand Primes. Of course, we don't have absolute confidence because they're vigilant enough. If they flee before we can lock onto them, it'll be very difficult to catch up to them," said the sword spirits. They could sense Genshin's grief and his determination to face death with equanimity. They knew that Genshin had someone he had to kill, so they did not try to dissuade him this time. Genshin nodded and said nothing more. He sank into his thoughts again. "Kea, don't worry. I will definitely avenge you, no matter how great of a price I have to pay," Genshin swore inside. His eyes were filled with boundless hatred. Afterwards, the Inata Tower appeared in his hand. With a thought, he let out Xianming, who was cultivating on the first floor of the tower. "Xianming, I'm sorry. I can't keep my promise. I have to end your cultivation in the tower early," Genshin said apologetically. Chapter 2490. An extremely powerful enemy is about to arrive. He killed Kea, so I plan on fighting him to the death to avenge Kea. He's a Grand Prime. You can't help me," Genshin said slowly. His voice was very calm, but cold killing intent was hidden within it. "What Grand Prime?" Xianming, who originally wanted to share Genshin's burden, immediately became tongue-tied. "Xianming, you're currently in the Tower of Radiance of the Radiant Saint Hall. You should be able to survive for a long period of time. You don't have to worry about being affected by the mist in there. Return to the Radiant Saint Hall as soon as possible," continued Genshin. Xianming sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Genshin's enemies were all peak experts who could suffocate him, which made him feel troubled. He wanted to contribute his meager strength, but he discovered that he was unable to help at all with his current strength. In the end, Xianming clasped his fist towards Genshin sternly and left by himself, returning to the Radiant Saint Hall. He knew that he would not be of any use if he stayed. Once the Grand Prime arrived here, he would probably be doomed as well. His relationship with Genshin was not as deep as he had imagined it to be, so he naturally would not place himself in danger for Genshin. With Xianming's departure, there was a flash in the Inata Tower. Qing Yishuan had also been let out by Genshin. Qing Yishuan currently sat on the fortune jade and comprehended her golden core of the laws of the sword. As soon as she left the Inata Tower, she naturally left the fortune jade as well, so her rate of comprehension immediately plummeted. Perhaps because she sensed the changes in the outside world, Qing Yishuan's eyebrows suddenly trembled gently, and she slowly opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, a sharp sword qi shot out from her eyes. It was as if it was about to condense into a solid substance. Her gaze was extremely sharp, but it also carried a strange charm that took one's soul away. In the past few years, Qing Yishuan had always sat on the fortune jade and cultivated. She used the golden core of laws of the sword that Sword Master Yun Qi had left in her soul to increase her comprehension of the laws of the sword. As a result, her rate of cultivation could be described as skyrocketing. There were no bottlenecks to speak of. Currently, her cultivation was at the peak of the Divine King intermediate stage, and she was only a step away from the Divine King advanced stage. At this moment, Qing Yishuan noticed Genshin, who sat on the ground. This time, as Genshin had revealed his true appearance, she recognized him with a single glance. Her eyes immediately narrowed. "Genshin, why are you here?" Qing Yishuan was stunned. She stared straight at Genshin as disbelief filled her eyes. Back on planet Tianming, that was the first time she learnt about some of Genshin's deeds. From the wanted posters of Genshin, she understood just how much of a storm Genshin had stirred up in the Saint's world in such a short time since he had arrived, to the point where half of the supreme divine kings had vanished. In the past, regular divine kings were unreachable in her eyes, let alone supreme divine kings. However, several hundred of the supreme divine kings, who could even rival primordial realm experts, had died because of Genshin, which shocked her deeply. Afterwards, when she learnt that 2 peak experts were hunting down Genshin, she believed that it would be very difficult for Genshin to survive. She had never thought that she would actually see Jianqin here in such an extremely sudden manner. This made Qing Yishuan extremely excited. There are some 5-colored divine crystals in here. Qing Yishuan, take these 5-colored divine crystals to the nearby teleportation formation and return to the Tianyuan family on the cloud plane. Be careful. You'll have to rely on yourself for the rest of the journey. I can't protect you anymore. Jianqin took out a space ring and said to Qing Yishuan. He did not smile at all. Keia's death filled him with grief. Apart from hatred, there was only fury in his heart. You can't protect me anymore. Qing Yishuan laughed involuntarily when she heard that. She could not help but show a sliver of pride. She said rather coldly, Do I still need you to protect me now? But Jianqin, let's not talk about the lower world. I don't think I've needed you to protect me ever since I came to the saints' world. Jianqin was in no mood to explain things to Qing Yishuan. He slowly closed his eyes and meditated, preparing for the final battle. However, Qing Yishuan seemed to think of something after saying that. She was slightly surprised, and the light in her eyes began to flicker. She asked with uncertainty, Jianqin, don't tell me the young Master Changyang who took me away from planet Tianming was you? Jianqin nodded and said nothing. Qing Yishuan became completely stunned after receiving confirmation. She stared at Jianqin blankly as her heart churned. She was unable to remain calm. No wonder Changyang had suddenly called him out when he was faced with the great, fortuitous encounter of Swordmaster Yunqi, telling him to accept his legacy. No wonder Changyang had provided him with all the resources he needed for cultivation for all these years for free, without any conditions. As it turned out, the mysterious young Master Changyang with great origins was actually the Jianqin she knew. Since that person was you, why did you hide it from me until now? Why didn't you tell me who you were earlier? Qing Yishuan's voice gradually turned cold. She stared at Jianqin with hostility as she said through gritted teeth. As soon as she thought about how she had displayed her weakness and helplessness before the young Master Changyang, before Jianqin's true identity, she became furious. She felt like she had been viciously toyed with by Jianqin. Oh, right, you remember that there was a woman beside you. She definitely wasn't the heavenly enchantress. So who was she? Qing Yishuan continued to ask through gritted teeth. She just happened to touch on Jianqin's sore spot with her question. Jianqin immediately became pained. At this moment, Qing Yishuan finally discovered that something was wrong with Jianqin after seeing him for the first time. Her face gradually became stern as she stared at Jianqin closely. She said, Jianqin, what's wrong? That person was Keia, but Keia is already dead. Jianqin said gloomily. What? Keia is dead? Qing Yishuan was shocked. Although her relationship with Keia was not particularly deep, they did come from the same place after all. Qing Yishuan go. Don't stay here for too long. The person who killed Keia is a Grand Prime. He'll find this place very soon. If you don't leave now, it'll be too late. I want to stay here and fight him to the death so that I can avenge Keia, Jianqin said. No, you're not a Grand Prime's opponent. If you want to leave, we'll leave together. Don't do anything stupid. Qing Yishuan immediately panicked when she saw Jianqin's determination to face death. She wanted to go up and drag Jianqin away forcefully. However, a supreme sword intent radiated from Jianqin, preventing Qing Yishuan from approaching Jianqin. I might not necessarily die, but if you don't leave now, you might never be able to leave. Don't worry about me. I know what I'm doing. Go to the Tianyuan family. There are even more people there that you need to protect. After some persuasion, Qing Yishuan left alone furiously in the end. She took the 5-colored divine crystals from Jianqin and began to search for the nearest interplanar teleportation formation to return to the cloud plane. P.S. Xiaoyao has posted many pictures of himself on his public account. To those who want to take a look, please follow Xiaoyao's public account on WeChat, Xinxing Xiaoyao 110. Pinyin is the pseudonym of Xinqing Xiaoyao. There's also a number for the police, or you can directly search for Xinqing Xiaoyao on the public account. To those who don't know how to follow public accounts, you can open the contact list of your public account. You'll see the menu for public accounts. You can click on it, press the plus sign in the upper right corner, and then directly search for the public account mentioned above. Xiaoyao had already posted many pictures on his public account. If you reply to EXN, you will see the picture of the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing, EXE. If you reply to Mo Tianyin, you will see the Empyrean Demon Lord's true appearance. You can't get the name wrong. There are even more pictures of other characters. They are all in historical information. To those who don't know how to find historical information, you can just reply to historical information. Chapter 2491. Heya, you go first as well. If I accidentally die in this battle, you'll regain your freedom. In the end, Jianshen let Heya out. He was about to face a Grand Prime. Although he had a certain chance of killing his opponent with the fusion of the twin swords, or at the very least, he could heavily injure his opponent. However, he needed to prepare for the worst. Master, you won't die. You will always be Heya's master. You will never forget Master's kindness. You looked at Jianshen affectionately. Only he knew that Jianshen had never treated him as a servant, even though he seemed to be master and servant on the surface. Instead, Jianshen had used up a tremendous amount of precious resources to forcefully push him up from the Divine King to the primordial realm. Just how many people in the saints' world would treat their servants so selflessly? As a result, Heya felt unforgettable gratitude towards Jianshen. Master, it's Heya's uselessness. I can't resolve Master's problems, and I've become a burden instead. You will wait for Master's triumphant return from afar. You bowed deeply towards Jianshen before leaving the meteor as well. He did not actually leave. Instead, he sat down very far away from Jianshen and waited for Jianshen quietly. Master, you have to live on safely. You can't die. Heya prayed silently as he sat in the dark space. In the blink of an eye, Jianshen had already sat on the meteor for 3 days. During those 3 days, his vital energies had recovered to their peak, and he was in his best condition. The azulite swords were prepared as well. All he needed to do was wait for Jianshen's decision, and the swords would immediately fuse and unleash devastating power. Of course, Jianshen did not just use the azulite swords to deal with the Elder of Mountains and Seas. In order to kill the Elder of Mountains and Seas in a single stroke, Jianshen even used the fleshly core he had obtained on the desolate plane as a trump card. The fleshly core was the source of Gusta's power. It possessed extremely terrifying power, such that even Jianshen had to be careful when absorbing it, afraid that he would destroy the balance of the energy inside. Now he had already made up his mind. If the fusion of the sword still could not kill his opponent, he would destroy the balance of the energy in Gusta's fleshly core and make it explode. It's already been 3 days. Why hasn't he come yet? Jianshen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was cold. He stared into the distance, in the direction of the star brilliance plane. According to his understanding of that expert, with his speed, he should have rushed over in 3 days. Jianshen thought. Jianshen's wait. Very soon, time passed quickly. On the 4th day, on the 5th day, the Elder of Mountains and Seas still did not come like Jianshen had imagined. On the other hand, Jianshen gradually lost his patience and became rather irritable. He had already prepared everything. First, he fused the twin swords before detonating Gusta's fleshly core. He was determined to kill the Grand Prime. In the end, the Grand Prime actually did not come. He felt like he had nowhere to vent his power. After waiting for half a month, he finally stopped. Jianshen finally could not sit still any longer. He stood up from the meteor. He had no idea why the peak expert who had been pursuing him had not come, but he had already waited for half a month. He did not plan on waiting any longer. Master, the expert probably won't be coming, right? At this moment, Heya returned from afar and said in joy. Jianqin was emotionless. He did not reply. After a moment of silence, he said with bitterness and eagerness, Heya, try using your innate ability. See if you can still sense Kaya's location. Heya nodded and immediately used his innate ability. Master, I can't sense Kaya at all. Hey, you shook his head a while later. Jianqin's heart ached when he heard that. He became gloomy. Even though he had already guessed that this would happen, he still held onto a sliver of hope. Without a doubt, Heya's words had destroyed his final sliver of hope. I'll get revenge for Kaya soon. Since he won't come looking for me, I'll go look for him myself. Heya gritted his teeth. Afterwards, he stowed Heya away in the Inata Tower. He shot off as a streak of light, heading for the nearest teleportation formation that could take people to other planes. Several months later, Jianqin found the nearest teleportation formation. Afterwards, he used it to teleport continuously, directly making his way to the Prosper Plane. Traveling through teleportation formations was extremely fast. After teleporting several times, Jianqin crossed over a dozen planes and a small portion of the Saint's world. He arrived at his destination, the Prosper Plane. The Prosper Plane. So this is the Prosper Plane. Jianqin looked at the people on the streets as he stood in a bustling city on the Prosper Plane. He felt gloomy. This was where he had returned the Inata Tower. This was where all his troubles ended. Originally, he should have come here with Kaya, but now she was no longer here. Kaya's familiar appearance and voice only existed in his memories. This made Jianqin feel empty, as he had lost a very good friend. He's gone up, he's gone up. He's actually sat on it. Sima Wuji sure is impressive. It hasn't even been 100 years since he broke through to late Divine King. He hasn't even reached the peak of cultivation. Yet he can actually sit on the Divine King's throne. Sima Wuji is the prodigy of the Sima clan. It makes sense that he could sit on the Divine King's throne so quickly. Aye. Just as Jianqin became gloomy, a series of cries rang out nearby. At this moment, there was already a sea of people in front of them. Many cultivators had gathered, and the square in front of them was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. A transparent staircase led up above the heads of all the people. The staircase seemed to contain the truths of the world, as if it had been condensed from the ways. It possessed the power of the world. At the end of the stairs, at a height of 3,000 meters, there was a huge throne that stood there out of thin air. At this moment, there was a young man in a purple gold gown sitting cross-legged on the throne. The throne did not seem to be as easy to sit on as it seemed on the surface. When the late God King young man sat on the throne, he felt like he was enduring tremendous pressure and a test at all times, causing him to constantly tremble. His face paled and paled as well. It constantly changed. Jianqin stopped. He sucked in a deep breath and calmed himself down. He also looked at the huge throne in the air. Naturally, he knew about the throne. It belonged to the renowned Divine King of the Saints' world. The Divine King's throne could be found across the 49 great plains of the Saints' world. It had existed for an extremely long time, and no one knew when it had been created. However, in the Saints' world, every single Divine King would take pride in being able to sit on the throne. As long as they could engrave their name on the throne, they would immediately become a supreme Divine King, bringing glory to their ancestors. It was a symbol of identity and status. Chapter 2492. As a result, engraving one's name on the Divine King's throne, even if it was the lowest ranking, was a supreme honor to the countless Divine Kings in the Saints' world. Jianqin stood in the distance as he stared at the Divine King's throne calmly. He had heard a lot about the Divine King's throne. Back in the southern region of the Cloud Plain, the first Divine King he came in contact with, Duanmu, was an expert on the Divine King's throne. However, Duanmu Divine King had only sat on the Divine King's throne. He had not left behind his name. As a result, Duanmu Divine King was not a true Divine King. 3 days. As long as he can last for 3 days, Sima Wuji will have the right to engrave his name on the Divine King's throne. From then on, he'll become a glorious Divine King. Don't underestimate these 3 days. Although Sima Wuji's talent is exceptional, he has only reached late Divine King recently. He might not be able to last for 3 days as long as he sits on the Divine King's throne. He'll be tested by the Divine King's throne at all times. In the Saints' world, there are many people who can sit on the Divine King's throne, but only a handful of them can truly leave behind their names. Whether he can leave behind his name or not will depend on whether Sima Wuji is stronger than the last person on the Divine King's throne. The Divine King's throne is already full. If he wants his name to appear on it, he needs to push the last person down. Many cultivators discussed with one another around the Divine King's throne. They understood the Divine King's throne extremely well. Jianchen looked behind the Divine King's throne. With his eyesight, he could clearly see a stone tablet that possessed the power of ways on the huge throne. Names were densely engraved on the stone tablet. They were arranged neatly from top to bottom. There were exactly 1,000 names. These 1,000 spots were not unchanging since ancient times. Instead, they were constantly changing. Once an expert on the Divine King's throne broke through to the primordial realm or died, their name would immediately vanish from the Divine King's throne. Or perhaps a new Supreme God King would appear and make it onto the rankings. At the same time, they would push down the Supreme God Kings who ranked at the bottom. Jianchen glanced through the rankings. He did not see any familiar names. Aoyama, who had occupied the first position on the Divine King's throne in the past, had vanished from the rankings. Jianchen knew that Qingshan must have reached the primordial realm. It was impossible for him to die. Moreover, Shui Yunlan's name had vanished as well. The current strongest expert on the Divine King's throne was Zhu Wen. Jianchen was familiar with Zhu Wen. In the past, he had clashed with Zhu when in Poseidon Palace. He continued to glance downwards, but he did not see Mingdong's name among the 1,000 names. Jianchen was not surprised by this, as even though the Divine King's throne was a ranking that countless Divine Kings in the Saints' world yearned for, there were also people who did not care about fame, so they did not challenge the Divine King's throne. He was one of them. Jianchen remained there for 3 days. 3 days was neither long nor short for mortals, but it was only the blink of an eye for a primordial realm expert like Jianchen. Sima Wuji had successfully remained on the Divine King's throne for 3 days. His consciousness had turned into a sharp blade, and he had already left behind his name. Sima Wuji had successfully become an expert on the Divine King's throne. His name hung high up at the very end of the Divine King's throne. As soon as his name was left behind, Sima Wuji immediately seemed to lose all his strength. He rolled off the Divine King's throne weakly. A series of cheers immediately rang out from below the Divine King's throne. Many cultivators cheered for Sima Wuji. Looking at the name at the very bottom of the God King's throne, Sima Wuji's pale face smiled in excitement and joy. Now that he had become the Divine King, he would be even more valued by his clan in the future. However, at this moment, the name on the Divine King's throne changed. Before Sima Wuji's name could even warm up, it was pushed down by an unfamiliar name. Jianchen, who was observing the Divine King's throne, just happened to see the change. However, when he saw the name at the very end, he was stunned. This was because he was not unfamiliar with the name that had pushed Sima Wuji down. He was extremely familiar with it. Qing Yishuan, the name that appeared on the Divine King's throne afterwards, was actually Qing Yishuan. The Divine King, Qing Yishuan. Qing Yishuan shouldn't have reached late Divine King yet, right? Jianchen stared blankly at Qing Yishuan's name. Qing Yishuan had only parted with him recently. Looking at the time, she should have already arrived on the cloud plain if nothing unexpected happened. However, as soon as he thought about Qing Yishuan's legacy, he understood. Qing Yishuan had inherited Swordmaster Yun Qi's way of the sword, and the legacy even contained the secret techniques he had left behind in the past. It made sense for her to possess such accomplishments. According to Genshin's estimations, the 8 experts he had encountered in the depths of the desolate plain had all been late Grand Primes at the very least when they were alive. Even the weakest late Grand Primes were at the 7th heavenly layer. Sword Master Yun Qi should have been one of the best among them. Qing Yishuan had obtained his legacy, so her future accomplishments were obvious. Qing Yishuan. Another Qing Yishuan has appeared. Which plane is this Qing Yishuan from? What a pity. Sima Wuji has been pushed down by a supreme divine king called Qing Yishuan as soon as he ascended to the divine king's throne. This Qing Yishuan is definitely more powerful than Sima Wuji. Otherwise, it's impossible for her to replace Sima Wuji. A series of sighs rang out around the divine king's throne. Everyone felt pity for Sima Wuji. However, Sima Wuji's face was filled with bitterness. He was dejected. Heavens, this Qing Yishuan's strength is actually still climbing. At this moment, cries rang out again. Everyone looked over, and sure enough, they saw Qing Yishuan's name surpass her opponent after opponent, climbing up from the 1000th position. This meant that the strength she displayed when she ascended to the divine king's throne had already surpassed the strength the owners of these names recorded when they ascended to the divine king's throne all those years ago. Jianqin was attracted by Qing Yishuan's actions as well. He looked at Qing Yishuan's name and watched as she constantly surpassed her opponents. He felt happy for her. In the end, Qing Yishuan's name stopped at the 950th position. She's actually surpassed 50 opponents. Who is this Qing Yishuan? She's ranked so high as soon as she ascended to the divine king's throne. I wonder if she's reached the peak of the divine king's throne. If she's reached the peak of the divine king's throne, it means that Qing Yishuan has very little room for improvement. Her ranking won't rise by much in the future. If she hasn't reached the peak, it means that she still has a lot of room for improvement. At the same time, a divine king's throne stood within a bustling city in the central region of the Cloud Plain. At this moment, an alluring woman in azure robes sat on the divine king's throne. Extremely sharp sword qi radiated from her. The sword qi was so powerful that it directly expanded beyond the divine king's throne, filling the entire city. All the divine kings gathered there were shocked. There was already a sea of people below the divine king's throne. Many cultivators had gathered there, and they all raised their heads to look at Qing Yishuan as they cried out. Don't tell me she's Qing Yishuan, the divine king who rose from the 1000th to the 950th. But that can't be right. She seems to only be at the mid-divine king's throne. Heavens! A divine king at the mid-divine king's throne. Just how terrifying is her true battle prowess? Quick, notify the clan. An impressive divine king has appeared here. She's only at the mid-divine king's throne, and she's already ranked. If she reaches the peak of the divine king's throne in the future, just how high will her ranking be? P.S. Qing Yishuan has already become a divine king. Her name will definitely spread across the desolate plain in the future. A picture of Qing Yishuan's character has been posted on Xiaoyao's official WeChat account. Chapter 2493. The people of the various clans on the Cloud Plain naturally gathered around the divine king's seat. As soon as they saw how Qing Yishuan had managed to make it onto the rankings as a mid-divine king, their eyes lit up. They immediately sent the news back to their clans as quickly as possible. The divine king's seat only recorded the most powerful divine kings in the saints' world. As a result, as long as someone could make it onto the divine king's seat, even if they were ranked last, many clans and organizations would scramble to rope them in. Not to mention that Qing Yishuan had made it onto the rankings as a mid-divine king. The potential she displayed was so great that it was enough to interest all the organizations on the cloud plane. This was because if they could rope in a prodigy like her, she might become a pillar of support for the clan once she matured. Immediately, the name of the divine king, Qin Yishuan, spread to the ears of the various clans and organizations as quickly as possible. What? She's only a mid-divine king, and she's ranked 950th on the divine king seat? Are you sure you're not mistaken? Mid-divine king? Is that true? Then what are you standing around for? Go investigate which organization Qin Yishuan belongs to and try to rope her in. What's the point of reporting to a prodigy like that? Go rope her in immediately. As long as she's willing to join the clan will nurture her without holding back. Similar voices rang out from various large and small clans all over the cloud plains. As a matter of fact, the news even reached the two rulers of the cloud plain, the Righteous Alliance and the Four Symbols Alliance. Immediately, some of the upper echelons of the two alliances sent people to the divine king's seat. Teleportation formations constantly flickered near the divine king's seat. The people from various clans all gathered around the divine king's seat through the teleportation formations. All of them stared at the slender figure who sat on the divine king's seat and murmured, "Is this woman Qin Yishuan? She is truly peerless in her generation, the champion of the world." Unknowingly, Qin Yishuan had already become the focus of everyone's attention. However, Qin Yishuan did not seem to sense it at all. She sat there without moving at all with her eyes closed. She had no idea that the entire cloud plane had shaken up because of her. Half a day later, Qin Yishuan slowly opened her eyes and floated down from the divine king's throne. As for her name, it had risen from 950th to 940th. For a mid-stage divine king to be able to rank so high and trample many peak-stage divine king beneath her feet, her strength could not be said to be weak. Fellow Taoist Qin Yishuan, we're from the Zaheo dynasty in the eastern region of the Cloud region. I wonder if you'd do us the honor of coming to our Zaheo dynasty. The Zaheo Empire of the eastern region was an organization on the level of an eternal empire. They possessed chaotic primes and were once the overlords of the eastern region of the Cloud Plain. Even though the situation on the Cloud Plain had changed now, the Zaheo Empire was still a peak organization in the eastern region. They possessed quite the right to speak. Fellow Qin Yishuan, I am a member of the imperial family of the Jinjian Empire of the western region. Under the orders of our emperor, I have specially come to invite you to our Jinjian Empire as a guest," said an old man. He was a primordial realm expert, a first heavenly layer infinite prime. The Jinjian Empire placed more importance on Qin Yishuan than anyone could imagine, sending a primordial realm expert to invite her. Afterwards, representatives spoke up one after another. They either invited Qin Yishuan or directly inquired about Qin Yishuan's origins. They used various methods to rope her in. These organizations varied in strength. The weaker ones only had infinite primes, while the stronger ones, like the Zaheo Empire and the Jinjian Empire, were the weaker ones. Humph! Suddenly a cold snort was heard. The sound was like muffled thunder. When it entered everyone's ears, it immediately caused everyone to quiet down. A young man with a striking appearance directly ignored the restrictions on flying in the city. He hovered high in the air and said, "Miss, I am Hu Wei, the Hall Master of the Four Symbols Alliance's civil war. With your potential, if you join our Four Symbols Alliance, you will definitely receive the full nurturing of our Four Symbols Alliance. It will only be a matter of time before you reach the peak." Qin Yishuan immediately frowned when she heard him mention the Four Symbols Alliance. Although she did not know a lot about the situation on the Cloud Plane, she had heard about the two overlords that controlled the Cloud Plane. These two overlords were not to be trifled with. Is the Four Symbols Alliance impressive? Aren't they just the remnants of the Tian Empire that we've chased away to the southern region to be cowards? When did you become so arrogant? As soon as Hu Wei's voice fell, Another voice filled with ridicule was heard. He saw a handsome young man in a white robe, with a handsome face and a folding fan in his hand. He walked over unhurriedly from a distance and looked at Hu Wei with provocative eyes. Hu Wei's face sank slightly when he saw the young man in white robes. He called out coldly, "Tong Tian, so it's you. If it weren't for the fact that you have the Tong family behind you, I would only need to lift a finger to kill you as a mere over-god." Tong Tian curled his lips in disdain and mocked. "Hu Wei, don't talk about your shitty hall master. If it weren't for the Four Symbols Alliance behind you, do you believe that I would be able to turn your shitty hall to dust with a single word? You, the so-called hall master of the battle hall, is not even worth a fart in front of this young master. You should obediently scram back to the southern region. The middle region is not a place you should be." Hu Wei was rendered speechless by Tong Tian's words. His face darkened and paled as he flew into a rage. However, he did not dare to do anything. Although he did not take Tong Tian, who was only an over-god, seriously at all, Tong Tian's identity was extraordinary. He was the most beloved descendant of the ancestor of the Tong family, Tong Wuming. In the end, Hu Wei looked at Qing Yishuan, who stood before the God King's throne. Tong Tian's appearance and provocation no longer put him in a good mood. He asked coldly, "Qing Yishuan, are you willing to join our Four Symbols Alliance?" Qing Yishuan revealed a rare expression. She originally wanted to challenge the Divine King's throne and return to the Tianyuan family as a supreme Divine King, indirectly increasing the status and fame of the Tianyuan family. In the end, she had underestimated the importance of the Divine King's throne in the saints' world. She had never thought that the ranking of the Divine King's throne would push her fame to the peak and draw over the people of the Four Symbols Alliance. It would have been fine if the people of the Four Symbols Alliance had come, but Tong Tian, who seemed to be from a great clan, had appeared as well. Tong Tian's appearance put Hu Wei in a rather awkward position. Hu Wei had come to be angered by Tong Tian because of her. If she did not accept Hu Wei's invitation to join the Righteous Alliance, she might end up offending the Righteous Alliance. If she was alone, then so be it. She could just leave the Cloud Plain if she offended them. However, the Tianyuan family that Jianqin had founded was here. If she offended one of the two rulers of the Cloud Plain as soon as she arrived, it would be extremely detrimental to the Tianyuan family. After hesitating, Qing Yishuan clasped her fist in the end. "Thank you for your kind intentions for Symbols Alliance. However, Qing Yishuan already has a clan, so it's not suitable for me to join another organization." Hu Wei's face sank when he heard that. His voice gradually turned cold as well. "May I ask which clan you come from?" Hu Wei was already in a bad mood. Now that Qing Yishuan had publicly rejected the Four Symbols Alliance's invitation, he immediately became furious. He swore inside that no matter which clan Qing Yishuan came from, he would teach the patriarch of the clan a lesson. The Four Symbols Alliance was one of the two rulers of the Cloud Plain right now. They stood on equal footing with the Righteous Alliance, so they were a colossal existence on the Cloud Plain. Aside from the Tianyuan family in the southern region, there really was no organization on the Cloud Plain that the Four Symbols Alliance could not afford to offend. As for Qing Yishuan's identity as the Divine King, Hu Wei did not think too much about it. Being a Divine King only represented potential. It was not certain that they could reach the peak. They could also die prematurely. Chapter 2494. Qing Yishuan became slightly angered when she saw how overbearing Hu Wei was. Although Hu Wei was a primordial realm expert, he had only become a first heavenly layer infinite prime recently. Although she was still some distance away from infinite prime with her current level of cultivation, Qing Yishuan did not fear him at all. This was because she had obtained Swordmaster Yun Qi's legacy. He had left behind several extremely powerful secret techniques in his golden core of laws. They possessed enough power to shock the world. Once she used them, she could kill opponents of the same level instantly with her current strength. She could even deal with some experts who had just reached the primordial realm. However, Qing Yishuan feared the Four Symbols Alliance behind Hu Wei very much. As a result, she could only endure Hu Wei's overbearing attitude. What's it got to do with you what organization they're from? Hu Wei, don't forget that when you were a divine king, you were just an ordinary divine king who didn't even have the right to become a divine king. Even if you reach the primordial realm, you won't have much of a future. In terms of status and prospects, you're nowhere close to any of the supreme divine kings, Tong Tian mocked. Tong Tian sneered from one side. The relationship between the Righteous Alliance and the Four Symbols Alliance had never been harmonious, so he did not show them any respect when he spoke. Afterwards, Tong Tian looked at Qing Yishuan and said politely, "Fellow, I am from the Tong family of the central region of the Cloud Plain. Out of the 5 regions of the Cloud Plain, our Righteous Alliance controls the other 4 regions, aside from the southern region. As a result, there's no need for you to worry about the Four Symbols Alliance in the central region. They won't dare to act recklessly here." Tong Tian ignored Hu Wei's darkened face at all. He continued, "Of course, you can choose to join our Tong family, as long as you become a member of our Tong family, let alone the leader of the battle hall. Even the upper echelon of the Four Symbols Alliance will have to consider the consequences of provoking our Righteous Alliance. Thank you for your kind intentions, young master. However, I already have a clan, so it's not suitable for me to join another organization." Qing Yishuan declined once again. "How about this?" Tong Tian did not force the issue. After muttering to himself for a while, he continued, "Why don't you tell me which clan you're from, fellow cultivator? I'll have the people in the Alliance keep an eye on you and prevent the Four Symbols Alliance from making trouble for you. The Four Symbols Alliance is a remnant of the Tian Empire. They are rather ruthless, so we need to be on guard against them." Qing Yishuan hesitated when she heard that. From what she understood, the clan founded by Jianqin was an obscure, small clan in the Saints' world. Perhaps there was no other divine king in the entire clan aside from Jianqin. After all, she knew Jianqin's origins like the back of her hand. Although Jianqin was the sovereign of the humans in the Tianyuan clan, the Saints' world was not a tiny place that lacked resources like the Tianyuan continent. How long had he been in the Saints' world? How could he establish such a powerful family in such a short period of time? If she really divulged the existence of such a weak Tianyuan family, both the Four Symbols Alliance and the Tong family would probably be able to make the Tianyuan family disappear from the Cloud Plain with a single breath. As a result, Qing Yishuan felt troubled. She had no idea whether she should tell them or not. After all, the Tianyuan family was just too small. It was not necessarily a good thing for them to raise the attention of the major powers on the Cloud Plain so early. However, she soon remembered that both the Tong family and the Righteous Alliance only needed to investigate a little to find the Tianyuan family. As a result, she no longer hesitated and said, "My clan is from a tiny place called the Tianyuan family in the Pingtian Empire of the southern region. It's nothing significant, so the Righteous Alliance and the Four Symbols Alliance obviously have no idea about it." When she mentioned the Tianyuan family, Qing Yishuan had already prepared herself for the worst. Once, Hu Wei of the Four Symbols Alliance tried to suppress the Tianyuan family. She would lead the Tianyuan family to face them head-on and fend off Hu Wei. If she truly ran out of options, she would join the Righteous Alliance and fend off the Four Symbols Alliance. However, what confused Qing Yishuan was that when she mentioned the Tianyuan family, both Tong Tian and Hu Wei's expressions became extremely strange. It was not just the two of them. Even the expressions of the representatives of the various organizations in the surroundings became extremely interesting. "What did you say? You're from the Tianyuan family? Is that true?" Hu Wei's expression changed. He stared at Qing Yishuan with wide eyes as he became extremely stern. The Tianyuan family was the only special organization on the Cloud Plain that the Four Symbols Alliance did not dare to provoke. Hu Wei had never thought that the person he came across so casually would actually be from the Tianyuan family. Even though he was a primordial realm expert and the leader of the Four Symbols Alliance's battle hall, if he really offended any important figure from the Tianyuan family, the decision-makers of the Four Symbols Alliance would definitely skin him alive. You're actually from the Tianyuan family. Then, who are Jianqin and Ming Dong from the Tianyuan family to you? Tong Tian closed his fan with a bang and stared at Qing Yishuan with shining eyes. With that, Qing Yishuan became doubtful. In her understanding, the Tianyuan family should be a small clan that could not be brought into the limelight. However, from everyone's expressions and reactions, that did not seem to be the case at all. Moreover, this young master of a great clan actually knew the names of Jianqin and Ming Dong, which surprised her very much. Jianqin is my good friend, and Ming Dong is from my homeland, said Qin Yishuan. Her relationship with Ming Dong was not as close as Jianqin's, but they both came from the Tianyuan continent, so she could only refer to him as someone from her homeland. Tong Tian rolled his eyes and said in a strange tone, I know Hu Wei's personality and style like the back of my hand. Fellow Taoist, you have offended Hu Wei by rejecting his invitation. With Hu Wei's personality, he is not a match for Hu Wei. With Hu Wei's personality, he will definitely seek revenge. He might even use the power of the Four Symbols Alliance to wipe out the entire clan. As a result, once you return, you must explain this to the Tianyuan family so that they can come up with a plan. Qin Yishuan's expression changed slightly when she heard that. However, she could vaguely sense that something was off. Shut up. Tong Tian, don't you dare slander me. However, before she could think too much about it, Hu Wei interrupted Tong Tian with a pale face. Afterwards, he completely changed from his cold attitude. He clasped his fist at Qin Yishuan with a smile and said, Miss, don't listen to Tong Tian's nonsense. Our Four Symbols Alliance is the best friend and neighbor of the Tianyuan family. How can we do anything to harm the Tianyuan family? Everything before was a complete misunderstanding, so please don't mind it. If Hu Wei has offended you in any way, he will definitely ask for forgiveness in the future. Qing Yishuan stared at Hu Wei in a rather stunned manner. The hall master of the battle hall of the Four Symbols Alliance had been so great just a moment ago, yet he had begged for forgiveness in the blink of an eye. Qing Yishuan was completely stunned by the drastic change in attitude. She had no idea what had happened. Is the Tianyuan family a peak organization on the cloud plane that even the Four Symbols Alliance doesn't dare to offend? This thought suddenly appeared in Qing Yishuan's head, but she shook her head soon afterwards. She refused to believe it